What's up? What's happening? It's our final day from Radio Row, Las Vegas, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are loaded again. I will say, about, 45 minutes ago, I was looking at the rundown, and the way we do this, Anthony, is Anthony Haney's back in our DC studios. The way we do it is like when we have we have a spreadsheet, and we put guests in time slots. And we had a bunch of guests that were in the section below the labeled time slots, as in they were still floating. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, okay, I got to claim a time? Let's go. So we are loaded up today with so many media friends and some folks that I don't know, but I'm very excited to meet. And that includes our first guest coming up in about 15 minutes, Kalyn Khaler from The Athletic, who wrote this incredible story on Kyle Shanahan's essentially surveillance state with the San Francisco 49ers, where he has a camera in every single meeting room and has the ability to watch and listen to all of his team meetings from his office. It's something his dad used to do, including in Washington. Kalyn got the inside scoop on it, so we will talk to her about that and Super Bowl 58 coming up at 1:15. 1:30, Scott Graham, who you will hear all Sunday long here on the Team 980. He is the host of Westwood One's pre- and post-game coverage. So their Super Bowl coverage, Scott Graham will join us, one of the great voices in our business. He's going to join us coming up at 1:30. My pal Damon 2 o'clock is kind of the Friends Hour. Damon Amendolara scheduled to join us. 2:15, Bomani Jones is going to stop by the show. And then the 3 o'clock hour, I'm going to circle back to 2:30 in a second, Anthony, because that's honestly, if we're being totally transparent with the audience, and I would tell this to any of the other guests, we're most excited for what could happen for us at 2:30. But we will also have Mike Golic Jr. stop by. He might actually close out the show and do real things with us, so that'll be fun. We might have Don Van Natta stop by, so it is just another stacked day here on Radio Row. Clinton Yates, if I didn't mention him as well. So just a phenomenal day of radio here to close out the week. But at 2:30 today, Anthony, I should say, sorry, I'm not using Pacific time because that's where I am. Why didn't you stop me before that? The audience doesn't care what time Pacific time things are happening. All of you are on the East Coast. Anthony, why did you let me do that?
I was just waiting for you to stop so I could correct you.
Oh, okay.
But,
you should have just cut me off.
Okay.
That's true. I'm just excited.
I know. I could hear it in your voice. I didn't want to stop the excitement.
So at 2:30 local time, which is 5:30 Pacific, or sorry, 5:30 Eastern, 5:30 for all of you on the radio. Something we have talked about doing for years is going to happen. I'll be totally honest with how this is going down. Kevin Harland, who is calling the Super Bowl for Westwood One, is going to be on with Grant, who's 5 feet away from me down the dial on 106.7 The Fan. We have like a 15-minute block between the two stations. Grant has been nice enough to grant us a small piece of his block because we are going to explain to Kevin Harland, one of the great broadcasters of this generation and of any generation, that there is an entire segment of our show that was started to be able to play something that he did. So at 2:30 today, at 5:30 today, eventually I'll get it right. At 5:30 today, Kevin Harland will be made aware that real things real people have said into real microphones exist, which if you're listening now, you might not know. That is the last segment of our show every single day. It is how we play some of the best sound, and it's sound bites, it's play-by-play, it's funny internet things. Like if there's audio to a meme, it's going to wind up in that segment. And the segment was started when I was doing nights and weekends as a way to round out that show, whether it was overtime or the Hoffman show on weekends, Sunday mornings back in the day on The Fan. It was started because I wanted to play Kevin Harland doing play-by-play of drunk people running across the field. That had happened. It's happened many times when Kevin is calling Monday Night Football for Westwood One. And I needed an excuse to play that sound. And I came up with the idea of real things real people said into real microphones. I played that sound, and people were tweeting me like, that's an amazing segment. Please do that every show. And so basically every show since, including something that from day one we've done on the daily Team 980 edition of the Hoffman Show, was started because of that. So I will tell a more concise version of that story to Kevin Harland probably around 5:40-ish by the time he gets done talking to GP over there. So I'm excited for that. That is coming up later on in the show. Anthony, is there any particular guest that you are most excited for on our final Radio Row show here today?
Bomani. I think he's a very unique guy. Definitely seen him all over ESPN. He's usually with what is the Poppy and
Levitard. I mean, that show's been that show was such a behemoth. Here's what I love about Bo, and I respect so much about Bomani, right? Because I don't always agree with all of his opinions, but he is a guy that comes from a different background than most of us in this business. And there's kind of two paths that people take. One is what I would call the fan path. Like, you're a big fan of sports. You got into it, and I would say this is a harder path to take these days because there's so many people that took the similar path that I took, which is the broadcaster path, right? But you kind of take it from like a journalism or a fan standpoint. And I guess there's still people that like go to broadcast school but are mostly fans, and kind of take that versus like the reporter route that I took. But Bomani is someone who got into media, I will always use the word despite having an economics background. So he had this, he thinks like an economist. And that results in, I would say, some different calculations than a lot of us have. And sometimes it's a lot more cut and dry. So I'm definitely excited to talk to Bo. If you missed the end of the show yesterday, I actually went and said hi to Bomani in person in a commercial break. And then I was late getting back. And for the first time in the show's history, Anthony had to bring us back out of break.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You did. So it wasn't as nerve-wracking as you imagined it to be.
Nah, not really. Because it was the end of the show. I knew, I wouldn't have to, do a 3-hour show. So it took a little bit more, pressure off me.
You're like, if I got to just do real things, I know how to do that.
That's easy,
Yeah. Relatively speaking, that is definitely the easiest of our segments to do. So we'll have Kalyn Khaler here in just a few minutes on the surveillance state, if you will, Kyle Shanahan story she wrote. But let's quickly in the 4 or so minutes that we have here, Anthony, kind of recap. There was so much news yesterday that I actually feel a little bit bad because I got home and realized there was some stuff that we definitely probably could have talked about on the show. And I do want to get into the Wizards a little bit later, the Gafford trade, and ultimately the Gafford trade and kind of the trades that didn't happen, some interesting day after trade deadline thoughts. But there is also a couple of news items in terms of the Commanders' coaching staff, some of which I have a better feel for and more questions and thoughts on than others. The most recent one is about 2 hours ago. Ben Standig was the first to report that the Commanders are hiring Larry Izzo as their special teams coordinator. Here's what I would say. I don't know a lot about Larry Izzo. I remember he was an NFL player. He was a guy who played special teams. And I'm guessing if Dan Quinn hires him, he's a very good special teams coach. I will say I thought it was interesting that this morning Jeremy Reeves and other special teamers from the Commanders, Scooter Harris, Terrell Burgess, and others were retweeting the sentiment and sharing that they really loved Nate Katzer, who did a largely tremendous job and helped Reeves specifically become an All-Pro. So I understand the sentiment there of why guys on the team wanted to keep Katzer around. I would have fully endorsed them keeping Katzer around, but they ultimately hire Larry Izzo. I think the more interesting one, because people are trying to connect tea leaves on every single thing that has to do with the quarterback, is Tavita Pritchard gets retained as the quarterback's coach. And it's just hard to know kind of what Tavita was as a coach. Here's what I do know. I often will go league consensus. What is the league telling you about someone? And Tavita was, even though he was at Stanford and whatever, Tavita was a guy that had a lot of options. He was a guy that I think a lot of teams wanted. And he is being retained. And whether that is to work with Sam Howell, which I know everyone just takes a big gulp, or work with a young quarterback, his experience as a college quarterbacks coach, working with a young quarterback, we'll see how young and who it is, I think is valuable. And I think it's hard to evaluate the job he did last year, in part because we heard we now know, I would say in even more detail, thanks to Nikki Javala and Sam Fortier, a post that came out this morning, or a piece that came out yesterday, I should say, in the Washington Post, that, EB was pretty tyrannical in how he ran his offense. Like, there were players asking position coaches, hey, can we run the ball more? He wasn't taking suggestions. Like, EB was set in his ways. And, you know, when Logan Thomas said, I appreciate that he came to work the same way every day, that is about, you know, I can appreciate that. That is the nicest thing that anyone was saying about EB. Like, they like him as a human being, and there's that side of it. But as a coach, like, he was consistent to a fault. Like, he just wouldn't be open-minded about things. And so if EB was in that much control of the offense, it's really hard for me to, like, put anything on Tavita or Randy Jordan or, I mean, obviously the O-line coach plays a role and is always a big one, but, like, was EB listening to any of these people? It's really hard to know. And I don't say that to, like, bash EB on the way out, but at the end of the day, like, it's clear that Tavita Pritchard is someone that was very highly thought of in that building, because you don't get to stay through all these changes at such an important position, at such a critical time for that position in the franchise's, you know, arc here, if you're not someone who can do the job very well. So look forward to hopefully, you know, shoot, we're going to put in a request and see if I can talk to Tavita. I'm not necessarily going to want to. I don't think he's going to go and tell us too much detail about last year. And there's, frankly, at this point, like, I think moving forward is important. But I think understanding where he is and kind of how he thinks and why Cliff Kingsbury, who we also would love to talk to, thinks Tavita is worth keeping around is something that I would like to know more about. The one thing I will say, too, is this is a staff now that's starting to have a lot of people that haven't worked together. And the one thing that I think is super critical for DQ to be quality control over, and for Cliff to keep in mind, and for all these coaches, is you don't want a Carolina situation. All these guys might be good individual coaches, Cliff, Tavita, Brian Johnson, but if they can't work together and they don't see certain things the same way, you're going to have a pretty gigantic failure offensively, which you definitely don't want to have in the first year of a high draft pick quarterback, because then you're just what Carolina was last year with Bryce Young. And you have no idea if Bryce Young is any good because of how messy the coaching staff was and how non-cohesive the coaching staff was a year ago. All right, Kalyn Khaler is about to join us here on set. She is with The Athletic, wrote a tremendous piece talking about the, I guess I'm going to use her word, the surveillance state. The surveillance state that is there in San Francisco, if you're watching on YouTube, about to see some very large human beings walking behind me, including the Lions' Aiden Hutchinson. That must mean we're live on Radio Row. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you see the guest chair has been brought back into the equation, and Kalyn Khaler from The Athletic is with us. Kalyn, good to see you. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Craig. Happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. You wrote a tremendous story on the San Francisco 49ers, and it's really, like, it is about the 49ers because that's where Kyle is now, but it's on, I would say, a tradition that Mike Shanahan started, one that passed through Washington, and I guess the word that we're looking for here is a surveillance state, essentially, that they've got. Well, how did you catch wind of this before we even dive into it?
Yeah, it's actually like a totally long and convoluted story. So at the time that Mike was coaching in Denver, that was his second head coaching gig after being in Oakland. He then went to Washington, obviously, and was there for 4 years, and it was not a very successful run, but it had been written about at the time that he was using cameras. Like Mike Silver, who was at Sports Illustrated back when in the Denver days, had written about it just very, in like a couple sentences. Like he'd seen the operation where in the head coach's office, in Mike's office, he had a setup, where he could unmute different cameras and listen. And so it was kind of like a control center in Mike's office. And I didn't know about that. The way I found out about this was our Jets writer, Zach Rosenblatt, wrote a story about the Jets quarterback room last year, 2022 season. The lead of the story was Robert Saleh sitting in his office, listening in on the quarterbacks meeting after they were done with a meeting. He was just like listening to them like chit chat afterwards, and like they were still talking about football. They were still going over plays, and that was the anecdote of like, look at how hard working this quarterback room is because they're still going over plays. But what I took away from that was
You're
like
holy
what
cow,
the hell?
How is he doing that?
I was like, that's really weird. I'm like, is this normal? This is not something I'd heard of before. So then I started texting coaches I knew around the NFL, one of whom had worked for Kyle in San Francisco, just randomly, because I was just like, okay, what coaches are going to respond to me quickly? So I'm just like, assistant coaches, whoever. Yeah. Is this normal? Are other teams set up this way? And he's like, oh, Saleh got that from Kyle in San Francisco. And I was like, oh, interesting. So then I'm like, well, where did Kyle? And then I start Googling Shanahan cameras, and then you'll see like these little sentences and other stories that pop up. So that's my long way to explain how I got the story idea. So it's basically a Shanahan tree thing. Mike started it in Denver, and the technology has completely evolved to the point now.
I was going to say, like, I imagine like an old school 1980s movie, like security guard sitting somewhere, probably falling asleep before the villain breaks in, like type of setup. And now he's probably got HD cameras with like crystal clear everything.
Well, and the difference now is that Zoom happened, right? So in 2020 with the COVID protocol, teams were limited in how many people could be in a meeting room, and they had to socially distance. And if they weren't able to do that, they had to be virtual. And so coaches who might normally pop into a meeting couldn't do that anymore. So it became a lot easier to do this type of surveillance because you were already setting up all of your meetings to be recorded on Zoom anyways. So when that happened, Kyle was already doing it in San Francisco, but they transitioned to Zoom, and now it's just made it easier for him to actually, this is the difference between Mike and Kyle. Mike couldn't join a meeting from his own office. He had to walk down the hall and open the door, which he did several times.
Right. So the opening anecdote to the story in The Athletic, which I would highly recommend anyone to read, is Mike overhearing a change that was being made. It was a protection, I think.
Yeah.
And him just running down the hall and being like, oh, hell no, we're not doing it, and this is why.
Yeah. And so there was like multiple stories of that. And on Media Night this week, I needed more stuff about Kyle because I had pre-reported all of the Mike Shanahan stuff.
Right.
And I had gotten a few players on the phone who had played for Kyle in San Francisco, but not many. So I was like, all right, Media Night, I got to get some Niners. So I went to their third string quarterback, Brandon Allen, and I'm like, assuming that Kyle is probably more involved with quarterbacks than any other position.
Right.
I'm like, does he, like, what is this like? And he's like, oh, we call the screen in our room like the Zoom screen, he's like, we call it the voice of God because Kyle will unmute and just start talking into their meeting. So that's where the technology has changed because Mike had to physically appear. Kyle doesn't even have to leave his office. He can just unmute himself and start correcting things, which is really interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it.
I know.
I feel like if I was like, I guess what it does do, like, I don't know. So I've got a lot of, the audience knows this, so I'm sorry to the audience for on some level being repetitive here, but you don't know this. So I do a podcast with Logan Paulson, who played for Kyle.
Logan was in my story.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Logan and I talk about stuff with Kyle all the time, and I think there's like a couple of different things that I've learned about why that tree is so successful. And one of them is the level of perfection that is needed to like get something in the playbook. Level of refinement is extraordinarily high, which is why I think these coaches like Slowick go to somewhere else and become very successful. Also, there is, like, if you're going to work for Kyle with the level of detail he has, your ego has to be in control. And I'd imagine, like, there are coaches that absolutely that would not fly with. And if you know that about yourself, like, you're probably not working for Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, and I think that's completely right. And the thing that was interesting about this is, well, I have 3 things to say, but the first thing is, I'll try to remember them all. But
that's been me all week.
Yeah. The first thing is, I did speak to a few people who were very critical of this system, but I couldn't include their opinions in any concrete way in this story because they were not even willing to go anonymous. Like, I couldn't refer to them in any capacity.
It's just like, yeah, I'll tell you, but you can't use it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because it shows, like, Kyle Shanahan is a very powerful figure. We've seen 3 different head coaches get hired from his staff. So he's got a lot of sway, and people are not wanting to be on the wrong side of that. So there are people who are definitely not fans of this, but everyone that is quoted in my story is like, yeah, we like it because it helps the coaching messaging stay consistent.
At the end of the day, if you're about the team, like, he's the guy that drives it.
Right.
So it's quality control in real time.
And Logan had a really good quote and a really good point that he made in my story when I talked to him, because he played with Mike and Kyle.
Right.
So he's got the experience of knowing them both and seeing directly how Kyle took things from Mike and how they're similar. And Logan was like, he also played other places outside of the Shanahan tree, like Chicago, I think Houston, Atlanta.
Yep.
So he said he noticed a difference right away when he was at a different organization that was not coached by a Shanahan, because he's like, I might be in like an offensive line meeting and the message from the offensive line coach is about our run game is like not lining up with the offensive coordinator, and the offensive coordinator doesn't have the knowledge to know that our first meeting went poorly. So his meeting goes bad, and then it's like all of the meetings are just like compiling in like the level of not being on the same page. And he was like, at first I just thought it was like a Shanahan thing, like, oh, they must be talking to each other all the time. He's like, but now that we're talking about the cameras, he's like, I think it was because of that system. Like, that means a lot.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I was going to say is going back to like the surveillance aspect of it, and I think this goes a long way in why some people are fans of this system, is there is the ability to mute your audio. So on Zoom technology, the position coach, if he wants to have a real conversation with his players, or even if he's like, all right, we're talking about our personal lives right now, like this isn't about football anymore.
Yeah, Kyle doesn't need to hear this.
Yeah, he can mute it. And Mike was very specific when he implemented this system in Denver and Washington. At the time, it wasn't Zoom, so there was a light switch or a dial that you could turn. And Mike was very specific to tell his coaches, hey, I don't want this to feel like a Big Brother thing. Like, if you want to talk, SHIT about me, go ahead and just turn the dial off. And then Chris Forster, who is now the run game coordinator.
Yes, great coach.
Great coach. He told me that there were several times in Washington where he forgot to turn the switch back on after turning it off, and Mike's assistant had to come to his office and be like, hey, you need to turn this back on. So so Mike did care to be like, I need to hear everything about football. But if it wasn't, he was like, all right, just do your thing. Like, I don't want you to feel like I'm watching you every single second of the day. Right.
That is so cool. There's so many more anecdotes and so much great insight, and you get more Logan Paulson, which, I mean, what more does my audience want than more LP?
He's great. I had never met him before.
Well, we'll have
Big fan.
Now we have to get you on the podcast.
Yeah.
We have to get you on Take Command.
Yeah.
So we'll get that all scheduled. We have each other's email. We'll get that done. Maybe we can do like a podcast length version of this and talk about some more of the anecdotes.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be radio friendly, so that's also fun.
Right.
Kalyn Khaler, you read the story in The Athletic. It's so good. Definitely check that out. When we get back here on Radio Row in Las Vegas, Scott Graham, one of the great voices of the NFL on Westwood One, joins us here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are scheduled at this time to be joined by Scott Graham of Westwood One. So we will. We're working on getting Scott over here. So we'll see what happens as we're live on Radio Row. Looks like I see our on-site producer Jacob, who's just crushed it this week, and the PR person from Westwood One chatting it up right now. So we are. I know Scott is actually taking some time out to join us from his pre-production work because they have some obscene number of hours of pregame coverage on Westwood One, which you will hear all of on the Team 980. But I thought I heard the number 18 for the weekend. That can't possibly be right. There's no way. I think that might be Scott right there. We'll see in a moment. I guess we'll figure that out. Maybe that's not. We'll see if that person that I thought was Scott Graham. This is the fun of radio too, Anthony, is I've heard Scott Graham's voice for years, for over a decade. He's one of the great, some people know his voice and don't realize that's his name, and you're going to hear him in a moment when he sits down with us on Radio Row, and you'll be like, oh, that's that guy? So I'm excited to talk to him. But yeah, there is an obscene amount of work that goes into the Super Bowl on Westwood One. Scott Graham is one of the biggest people who is a part of it, and he is scheduled to join us any moment. So I just got the word that he is coming in just a moment. I will say this, that's those stories from Kalyn and the piece itself are so freaking interesting, and you wonder how certain teams are just better coached than others. You wonder how certain teams are locked in on certain details and others are not. And you hear stories like, oh, they've got Zoom capabilities and cameras in every single room, and you're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I see how they're able to get things together because they stop problems before they start. And the story that she relayed from Logan, that was in the story. I can't wait to follow up on this, by the way, on Take Command on Monday. But that if in other places they have miscommunication, and that miscommunication then gets to the bigger offensive meeting, now you've got two different messages being sent. It's how you have these massive problems and attention to detail and things, or guys looking confused. I can't imagine how much that happened last year on the Washington defense. It's just got to be a factor in terms of what has gone down. And I think it's interesting too when you look at some of the problems last year on Washington's offense, and it's enhanced by the fact that Eric Bieniemy did not get to, I should say, hire his staff. But that is part of the issue, right? He doesn't get to hire the staff. It doesn't seem like he communicates particularly well with the staff. And now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of guys who aren't executing, and it seems like they're on different pages, and it's because they are. It sometimes it's that simple. Your organizational structure is not set up in a way that you really have a chance of succeeding. And then there's other teams that not only are set up to succeed because they hire the right people and they do the proper vetting and all of that stuff, but they also have literal instruments, cameras, microphones, etc., in place to ensure that things go down the way that they want. The quality control is that high. So really fascinating story from Kalyn, and you could definitely read more on that in The Athletic. Anthony, I know this is a wacky bit in terms of the clock, but here's what I think I actually want to do, because I'm looking at the rundown right now, and we have a blank space next, which we were just going to talk amongst ourselves, do some good old-fashioned sports radio content. But I would honestly rather talk to Scott more. So let's do this before Damon Amendolara joins us at 5, Bomani Jones at 5:30, and Kevin Harland stopping by for a quick moment after that. Let's take a break here, and we'll go long with Scott Graham, the pre- and post-game host of Westwood One's coverage of Super Bowl 38, next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And it is a pleasure now to be joined by one of the great voices in our business. Just a true professional guy whose work I've admired for a long, long time as a radio nerd myself. That is Scott Graham of Westwood One. Scott, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me. And, it's Friday here, so this place is hopping a lot more than it was just a couple of days ago. You could have walked through here on Tuesday night and some tumbleweed rolling by. Now it's really going.
Yeah, these last 2 days, it was funny earlier because it was a little quieter this morning, and some of our colleagues over here, our fellow DC guys, were talking, and we're like, man, it's a little quiet. And then Gronk walks in. I'm like, I think the chaos is about to peak again. Don't worry, have no fear. Gronk is here.
Chaos does follow Gronk.
Yes, follow, lead, surround all sides. But you have been, this is Super Bowl 15 for you, and you will hear Scott's coverage, of course, this weekend on the Team 980 as we have full coverage of Super Bowl 58, including Super Bowl Sunday, all of the pre- and post-game festivities. What's your favorite part of that pre-game, that lead-up? Because you guys do so much in the hours and hours and hours leading up to kickoff.
Well, what we do over the course of the week, and we start on Sunday, is we basically craft what that 4.5 hours before kickoff is going to be, starting at 2 o'clock Eastern. And we get a lot of the interview stuff done with players, done on Monday night. We have our own area as a rights holder away from the crowd on opening night. We get a lot done that night. This year, we got just about all of it done that night because that's the way the teams wanted it. Oftentimes in past years, we would go talk to the head coach on Thursday or Friday out at their facility, or the quarterback, would be set apart from that. This year, we got all of that done fairly early, and it's been really more about putting together the remainder of what we have, talking to the people that are going to be filling in around the rest of that, and then it's like a big jigsaw puzzle, right? It's okay, what goes here, what flows into this best, and you do it for an individual hour-long show, which could be a standalone based upon which radio station is carrying it, but you also are flowing for the full 4.5 hours, and by the time we get to 4 o'clock, it's must carry for everybody anyway, so we know what that's going to end up looking like. It's a very, very involved operation, but being part of that operation and trying to figure it out. Right before I came to you, we were trying to slot something else here, move something else there, because ultimately we're going to have everything in place pretty much by the end of the day today.
So take me inside that area Monday night where it's you and who else is conducting these interviews, because you guys have obviously Harland and the game broadcasters. You have so many different former and I'm assuming current players on set working with you, special to Super Bowl Sunday. So who's in the room and how do those interviews go?
We have 2 interview rooms so that as the Chiefs or the 49ers staff bring their players down, and we've made our requests for who those players are going to be.
Sure.
Before we ever get to the city. So we'll have the 2 rooms, and Laura Oakman, Mike Golic, and I all have interviewing responsibilities. We know who we're slated to interview.
Right.
We also know if 2 people show up at the same time that are both mine, and I'm talking to one of them, that Laura might have to be ready to speak to that person. But this year I don't think we had any of those. And we'll get our 6 to 8 minutes which with each of the ones that comes down, have our conversation, move on. I get out of the room. Golic jumps into the room because his interview has just come in. And we do that for the first team. In this case, this year it was the Chiefs. And then we do it for the second team with the 49ers. It can be a very efficient way of doing it. It could also be a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
This year was pretty efficient. I mean, it moved through exactly pretty much the way we thought it would.
That's nice, and I'm sure it helps that the Chiefs have done this a time or two before. The 49ers back for the second time in 4 years.
Both PR staffs this year, and in general, if you're not a newbie to this, a new team to this, they have a pretty good idea how this all runs.
Yeah.
It's the new teams that get here, they're like, wait a minute, what do I have to do now? And
right.
It gets, but again, we've had some experience with this too, so when you talk about Howard Deneroff, who's been the executive producer of Westwood One for so long, he can kind of help them make it easy for them and doable for us.
Right. Scott Graham, as if I need to give that voice any introduction, any reminder, Westwood One Sports is with us here on the Hoffman Show. What's the most interesting thing that came out of an interview in your mind? It could be something significant to the game, or just something that you learned about a player or a coach that you're like, wow, that really sticks with me.
I think that there's a number of things. I think that, everybody's been waiting to see what they're going to hear from Travis Kelce, and you will hear from Travis Kelce. And was there going to be any talk about Taylor? Yes, there is. But there are players that you don't think about with regard to, this is a prominently featured player, Trent McDuffie, who is a second-year player out of Washington and an all-pro in just his second year, playing kind of a hybrid slot corner position. He is one of the most interesting, intelligent, impressive 23-year-olds I've ever spoken to. And I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago maybe, during the season for one of our pregame shows. I got the opportunity to talk to him again. It's just so intriguing to hear the thought process that goes in for somebody who's really trying to be a student of the game. But, Christian McCaffrey, and the fact that, he decided he was going to train with a professional surfer because he was going to learn a different way to try to make himself that much better, just that much better each time. And what did that teach him? It taught him about the fact that, he could improve on his breathing. I mean, it's amazing when you hear individual players and coaches go through their process. Some great stuff there, but great stuff during the course of the week this week. Joe Montana is going to be joining us, and
decent get in a 49er Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, and he also played for the Chiefs and brought him to a championship game later in his career.
Yeah.
Wayne Newton's going to be joining us. Mr. Las Vegas. If you're going to do a Super Bowl from Las Vegas, why not sit down with the man from Donkashane, who, by the way, has a couple of tremendous stories to tell. So we try to vary it. We try to keep it fresh and moving along over the course of time, and hopefully we've gotten to that point, and then by the time we get to 6:39, we'll have a football game.
Yeah, for sure. Scott Graham is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Super Sunday coming up this Sunday. The whole 4.5 hours we are carrying on the Team 980, and we want to ask you about the game itself in a second before our time is done here. But that idea that everyone is leading towards 6:39, and that's when the thing begins. Except for you, that's kind of when you get to finally take a breath. What is that energy like for you as you're doing Super Bowl 15? For you, knowing that, I finally get to breathe when the game kicks off, as opposed to everyone starts holding their breath.
I do get to breathe, but my job is far from done, because when I do the post-game show and we get to the radio replay part, I've got to be pretty detailed about what happened leading up to the highlights we're playing. So while I'm sitting there watching the game, and this year I will be sitting next to Devin McCourty, who will be co-hosting with me pregame, halftime, and postgame, 3-time Super Bowl champion, I'll be taking notes on each drive so that when we ultimately get to the end of the game and say, these are the 8 highlights that we're using, I have the ability to walk my way through what it was. This holding call set this up. So I have to keep an eye on the game in that way, but no, I'm not talking anymore at that point for a while until we get to halftime. And then, post-game is an entirely different animal. Post-game is the game is over. Kevin Harland talks about who just won. The confetti comes down, and all hell breaks loose on the field. And Laura Oakman and Mike Golic are running in between players doing interviews. They're kicking upstairs to Kevin, and then ultimately I take over that part of it, and it's downstairs to Laura, over to Mike, back up to me. We're taking a commercial. Wait, we can't take a commercial. Laura's got this person. It's crazy, and we try to get as many of the winning players on as is possible, and that's quite an undertaking. And I'll tell you what, Laura has been doing this for a while.
She's so good.
This is her 6th Super Bowl for us, and I believe it's Mike Golic's 3rd Super Bowl for us. And Mike will tell you the story. He's a player. I mean, he was down in the trenches, defensive lineman in the National Football League. He was in no way prepared for what that was going to be like, the scrum after the Super Bowl, the first one that he did. Now he's gotten a little bit, more used to the idea, but He tells it funnier than I do.
He's a funny guy, that Mike Golic. By the way, Mike Golic Jr. will be joining us to close out the week later on in the show. And I will say this again, I feel like I'm blowing smoke here, Scott, but like I've listened as a radio person to you do this for a long time, and specifically on Super Bowl Sunday, because like so many millions of Americans, I'm driving to and from my Super Bowl party, and so I have distinctive memories of listening to that
Thank
chaos.
goodness people are in cars, because otherwise I can't figure out who would be listening to us on Super Bowl Sunday,
well,
right?
That's what it is, right? It's like you finish watching your Super Bowl finish watching the Super Bowl at your Super Bowl party. You get in the car. Hopefully, if you're listening to us right now, you'll flip on the Team 980 and you'll hear the chaos that Scott just described. And I have distinct memories of certain Super Bowls and driving home. One that's popping into mind right now is like driving home from my aunt and uncle's house to my grandparents' house on Long Island in New York, and like listening to that exact chaos that you're talking about. And Westwood One has been doing it well forever. As for the game itself, in our final few minutes here with Scott Graham, who again is the host for the pre and post game, halftime as well on Westwood One this weekend. Have you found yourself leaning towards any particular side for any given reason as the week has gone on and you have studied this game more and more?
When I look at the rosters globally, it's hard for me not to say that San Francisco is a team that has got a lot going for it, and when they have it going on all counts, they are a very difficult team to beat. The one, I generally will look at one group, offense, defense, from two teams. So there's 4 different groups. I'll look at one group in each Super Bowl, and I'm going to say to myself, this is the one that potentially could change the game. The Chiefs' defense could change this game.
Yeah.
They have played that well. Steve Spagnuolo had, and he proved it last week in Baltimore, or 2 weeks ago in Baltimore in the championship game. I mean, I thought for sure the Ravens playing at home would be able to get their offense going, and they were unable to do it. And that was Steve Spagnuolo. I talked with him last week, and he's very excited about this group that he's got. I would imagine Brock Purdy is going to see a couple of things early in this game that he has not seen before. I can tell you he's going to, because Steve Spagnuolo is probably going to throw some things out there that he hasn't thrown out there before. That could change and tip the scales in the Chiefs' favor in this game. Kansas City hasn't figured out a way to score in the second half in a while. They've put up points when they've needed to in the postseason right now. I would say that my gut would say that if the Chiefs' defense can't do that, this is San Francisco's game. But if the Chiefs' defense can do that, coin toss, and if you leave it up to Patrick Mahomes to win the game, he's going to win the game.
He's very good at that whole winning thing.
Yep.
Last thing for you. Have you talked to Kyle at all this week? Did you guys get a chance to chat with him?
Shanahan?
Yes.
I did not do the interview with Kyle Shanahan. Laura Oakman did.
I am curious if you talked to Laura about it. If not, I might have to go try to find Laura, who's been on the show before.
Yeah, she's not far away.
She's wandering around somewhere. There's obvious curiosity in Washington about Kyle, as his long history there. I personally am fascinated by the way he has been able to build that in San Francisco, and there's extra intrigue now with Adam Peters coming in Washington. But specifically for Kyle and his legacy, like, does he feel any pressure from what you've been able to gather of his Super Bowl history? Like, can he finally win one? Like, is there any of that you think has infiltrated the intense focus that is Kyle working on a game plan leading up to Super Bowl week?
It's got to be there. I mean, there's when you are as focused on what he does, it's got to be there. I don't know how much it invades his thought process. I don't know how much it invades what it is that he does, which is so rigid and so disciplined in terms of trying to get to where he wants to get to on a day, on a week, in a game. But it's got to be there. And it's funny because here he goes against Andy Reid right now, and a few years ago, Andy Reid, when they beat the 49ers, was in that exact position.
Totally. Yeah, no, it is something that we tend to forget, how quickly they can change. One game for it all on Sunday, 4.5 hours of pregame leading up to it, led by this man, Scott Graham, Westwood One. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And I guess you get to go finish putting together that pregame show now.
Yeah, we're going to be at it for a little while tonight, but we'll get there.
Best of luck. Damon Amendolara joins us here on set next. on Radio Row here in Las Vegas. Super Bowl 58 Sunday on the Team 980. Bomani Jones in 15 minutes right now. The man you just heard, Damon Amendolara, approver of the show and of Anthony's liking of dumplings, is with us here in Vegas. What's up? Are you awake?
Yeah. I'm alive. Awake is a stretch, but I'm alive. You know, I'm going on the air locally 3 a.m. So last night, not a lot of sleep. Basically, my week has been a series of naps.
Yeah. So what was worse, the sleep regression of your newborn child or this week?
Well, they're difficult in two different ways. The child was most difficult just from a sheer endurance standpoint because we had to stay up at all hours. He would not sleep unless he was in our arms. So we had to tag in at 1 a.m., tag in at 4 a.m., etc. This is harder just because I'm also consuming alcohol. And so that's made it a little bit more difficult just
That's a choice.
Yes, but it is
you
also
could have
Vegas.
Just gone your sleep deprivation and you were basically drunk already. That's actually like how the brain chemistry works.
You know what? Also, I actually have to perform here.
That's the thing.
When I was
watching, you have to speak.
When I was watching AJ, you know, all I'm doing is just keeping my eyes open with toothpicks. I'm not performing.
No, you have to not just speak. You have to speak in like coherent sentences and talk to people.
Slightly.
What's been your favorite interview over on SiriusXM this week?
Troy Polamalu came by and he said two things that blew me away. Number one, he said he did a Head and Shoulders commercial with Patrick Mahomes, and ever since the commercial, Mahomes has sent him a gift every month. Every month, right? Your eyes go up too. Like, who sends anybody anything every month besides like spam? And that is just such a thoughtful thing from Patrick Mahomes that speaks to, I think, an emotional intelligence that he has for teammates, for the fans, for the moment, for the opponents. The other thing that Troy said was...
Wait, Tone, did he tell you what the gift is?
No.
Oh.
No.
What if it was just like a bottle of Head and Shoulders? Because that would be fun.
Right, he just told his PR person.
Yeah, he's like, hey, make sure that, we get so much of this. Brittany's trying to tell me to get it out of the house.
Yeah,
Can you fix that for us?
The second thing that Troy said was he won 2 Super Bowls, one with Bill Cowher, one with Mike Tomlin. And he said in the 2008 Super Bowl, that's that classic game in which James Harrison returns the Kurt Warner interception, 100 yards, 99 yards. That's the Santonio Holmes tiptoe catch.
Yes.
That going into that game, Mike Tomlin was so laid back with the team, Polamalu was scared they were too loose. He's like, we got no guardrails around here.
No nothing.
And he said Tomlin knew the team well enough, but Polamalu was paranoid. And that is so interesting because if you now extrapolate that to today, the concern in Pittsburgh has been that Tomlin is so much of a player's coach, but he doesn't have natural leaders. Things kind of go askew. And I thought, boy, you go back to 2008, it worked for that team, but maybe that is the worst thing for the Steelers today. And you also don't think about Tomlin as being not buttoned up with details and discipline, but Polamalu was paranoid they were too loose.
That's pretty fascinating. And also, I would love to have Pittsburgh's problems. Are you kidding me? How he's never had a losing season.
No.
You know how many losing seasons I've covered?
A lot.
All of them, basically.
All of them.
All of it. I've covered teams, Damon, that have won divisions with losing seasons.
Well, and Troy Polamalu didn't play in the Ice Age. Like, he's relatively recent, and he played in 3 Super Bowls, 2 of which under Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
So I get Steelers fans are impatient. They're frustrated. They haven't won a playoff game in a number of years. At the same time, the current head coach has coached in 2 Super Bowls. Hard to get rid of a guy that's coached in 2 Super Bowls that hasn't had a losing season.
Yeah, we just didn't have the bad years so we can fire him. Maybe it'll happen in 2058. Yeah. Damon Amendolara, SiriusXM. You can catch him 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time, which unfortunately for him is 3 to 6 Pacific since we are sitting here in Las Vegas. You actually have a local take that I would like to discuss with you.
Yeah.
You were not a fan of the Cliff Kingsbury hire.
Oh, God.
And
This
I got to
guy.
admit,
This guy.
I think at first started very much where you were. I've warmed to it a bit, so I'm curious. Like, let's for the audience that hasn't heard the Cliff Kingsbury take. Where are you at on Cliff Kingsbury, Commanders offensive coordinator? Then we can have a little discussion.
Well, I think he's the biggest fraud in football because
that soft launch there.
Because he has not succeeded anywhere he's been to any significant degree. When he gets the head coaching job at Texas Tech, he never has a winning record within the Big 12. He's supposed to be a great offensive mind. With Patrick freaking Mahomes, his best season is 7-5 and a loss to the Texas Bowl. Then he somehow fails upward to get the head coaching job in Arizona. Every Tech fan was like, this guy's a bum. Then he gets the Cardinals job. Every year is the same thing. They start off hot. They collapse down the stretch. The one year they go to the postseason, they are completely ill-prepared to take on that Rams team. They're down 21-0 at the half, 28-0 in the third quarter. His team is known for penalties, poor coaching, sloppy play, and slow starts and or fades in the second half of the season. Then he goes to USC, and Caleb Williams has a worse season with him than he had without him, and USC crashes and burns. Now, I know that their defense was the bigger problem, but there were 3 other teams in the Pac-12 that scored more points per game than USC. And now he's going to take over a Washington gig because they're angling for Caleb, perhaps, and they know that there's a familiarity there. I just think this guy has never proven anything and just keeps getting plum jobs.
So everything you said in terms of the resume information is inarguably true. That's kind of how resumes work.
That's right.
Well, not for everybody, but that's a different story. There's some wacky
George
bits we can get in
O'Leary?
there. Yeah, I was like, there's a couple famous instances. That's certainly one of them. But I think when you look at you take a closer look at some of those stops, it was really the defense in a lot of those cases. I mean, how many 50 to 48 games did he lose at Tech? And so he is taking the offensive coordinator job, not the head coaching job. If somebody hired Cliff Kingsbury as a head coach, I wouldn't even have questions. It'd just be like, what? I guess what are you doing is a question, but I would be like, I don't really care what your answer is. That was a bad decision. Him as an offensive coordinator where he doesn't have to worry about the defense and perhaps can not fade because he is not worrying about the defense in the second half of the year or pretending to care about the defense the second half of the year is much more intriguing. And I think you start to talk to people around the league, and there's a lot of respect for what he does offensively, even if everyone's like, yeah, but he's not a head coach.
I understand I'm the bucket of cold water in a pool of optimism, and nobody wants that. And in D.C., I don't blame you guys. You guys have dealt with a lot of losing, a lot of bad Washington offense, a lot of bad Commanders football. I totally get why you'd want to believe in Cliff Kingsbury. But there's 2 things problematic, and you're right. Head coach, he's a total bum. Offensive coordinator, perhaps better. 2 things still worry me. Number 1, his offense consistently got less effective as the season wore on. I think defensive coordinators picked up on tendencies, and I don't think he's a very good game planner. I think he tends to stick to what he does and doesn't invest time in evolving that over the course of the season. The second thing that worries me is if you can't do it with Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Caleb Williams, what makes me think you can do it in the NFL with a rookie quarterback, which is going to happen this season for Washington?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think those are the concerns. I guess the things that would, and to be clear, these are the questions, right? I'm going to underline that again to say that, I agree with you that those are the questions. They are counting on the answers being, one, we had Dan Quinn on the show earlier this week, and he described Cliff as an elite competitor, which I think is interesting, and talking to people
what
around.
Coach isn't?
But there's levels to that.
Are some coaches lazy about competition?
I would say some are lazier than others. You want to look at the guy that was in charge here the last 4 years?
Okay, so you don't think he was very competitive, Ron Rivera?
I don't think that Ron Rivera was as competitive as Sean McVay. I don't think Ron Rivera is as competitive as Dan Quinn. I don't think Ron Rivera is competitive as a lot of other NFL coaches.
Ron Rivera played on the 85 Bears. He's not competitive? He doesn't want it as badly as Sean McVay does?
I think Ron cared about, because to me, it's also how do you define competitiveness, right? Is it about your drive to win, your hatred of losing, all of those things? I think Ron cared about a lot of other stuff, narrative-driven, much more than what was ultimately going to get me the results.
And maybe also the point in his career where he had already done stuff.
And to be fair to Ron Rivera, the man has a lot of life perspective. The battle with cancer was very, very real. That can take a hit, and he was dealing with a lot of other stuff. But I do think that what they're relying on is that Cliff, now with more time to figure out the offense, will do that as opposed to, oh, crap, I got to prepare for a team meeting because I'm the head coach and I probably shouldn't be.
I hope so. Look,
I do too.
I hope so. But there was a moment in his tenure with the Cardinals that will forever bother me. And that was in year number 4, he, early in the season, said, I don't like our practice habits. I don't like our focus. I don't like our mentality. We're taking things for granted. It's year 4. That's your job. Whose job is the mentality of the team but Cliff Kingsbury? Now, I realize it's different as an OC than a head coach. But, I mean, take some responsibility, dude. It's your team.
You want to know what I think is hilarious? You sound like all of us screaming about Ron Rivera the last 4 years.
Well, okay.
That's Damon Amendolara. You catch him 6 to 9 a.m. on Sirius XM. Bomani Jones, he's standing right there, and he's going to take
ready.
Damon's seat next. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are live on Radio Row. Bomani Jones is with us. What's up, Bo?
Hey, man, I'm good. How about you?
Good. It feels like Friday out here.
It does. I got to say, you need to feel loved. You walk into Mandalay Bay. I'm here to do this little 15-minute hit. It took me 20 minutes to get down here.
It is wild.
It is a hike. Everything is a hike inside the buildings
Yes.
of wherever it is that you go.
So we were here this summer, and luckily we stayed here. So, like, we actually, when someone was like, oh, yeah, down by the Shark Reef, I'm like, oh, I know where that is.
Yes. I
But-
came this summer to go to the Beyonce concert. And so this is, for people who don't know, the hotel where this is the closest one to the stadium. And so if
Right.
you're going to go to dinner before you go do something at the stadium, you do it here. That Shark Reef. I was like, oh, I know where that is.
Yeah, we were going to some Aces games in the arena right
Yes.
there. So, like, that is, it is definitely convenient. They did a good job, but it is kind of weird, especially because it's Friday. But this has happened every day. I don't know what time of the day you've been here. I know you were here around this time yesterday
Yeah.
because that's when, by the way, I have a funny story about that in a second. But, like, you feel all the East Coast midday shows and afternoon shows because we go till 7. Most people go till 6.
Right.
Like, you feel the building empty out behind you.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting being here 3 hours behind the East Coast because, look, man, I couldn't get here for no 6 a.m. Like, I
No.
can tell people, what am I doing here, man? I'm just prostituting myself, walking up and down this stroll, give them a little lip. I do you. I do somebody else over there. Daddy, you can watch if you want. Like that's when I'm in that position now. Like you walk around here and you just see all these people prostituting themselves. We saw people just a second ago wearing Letterman's jackets for Bounty paper towels.
Yes.
I ain't gonna lie, they were fresh jackets
No,
until
they're
you
nice.
realize it was for Bounty paper towels. And it's just a lot of people and you feel bad while you're doing it. You just walking around hoping to get shows, hoping somebody
the
pull
way-
you by the arm and pull you over.
The Bounty, they're making good money off that. Because actually, one of the guys that I saw yesterday doing it, he was just pimping himself out to Bounty, not necessarily to all the Radio Row. But like Terry McLaurin was walking around yesterday, which is like as big of a star as we have in DC. And I'm like, 17, what's up? And he's like, no, it's a good time. Like, we got to do a fun video bit. They gave me this nice jacket. I ate some chicken, and here we are.
But this is the other part, and we were just talking about this. You said this with Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin walk up to me. He better be wearing a Terry McLaurin jersey. Otherwise, he could be one of many football players walking around here whose identity I cannot quite surmise strictly on their faces. I mean, I know he wears 17.
Yeah, the thing is, like, we probably have a take on some of these guys' games that just walked by.
Yes.
We have no idea who they are because they're not wearing helmets. and
We just
jerseys.
had one guy walk past, and we were like, is this, and I'm not going to say it, but incredibly famous football player? And
Yeah.
we're just not sure.
No, that is Radio Row. And then, of course, there's always I think the other one, too, which I'm sure you get this a lot because you're what, like 6'3"?
Yeah.
So you get the people that you see on TV and you realize how tall or short they are. And I'm
Yes.
not saying that one is better than the other. I'm not being judgmental, but it's easy for you to do. You're 6'3".
Correct.
But like you get that too of like, oh, that's what you look like, not from the nipple line up on camera.
Yeah, and it's always most interesting when you figure out how tall somebody is or is not, especially if it's somebody you think you don't really like.
And they have a
And
certain
it's
energy.
always shocking when you find out. Like there was one
Yeah.
guy, he's a very prominent NFL reporter. I was stunned to find out he was 6 feet tall. I was sure he was 5'8", at most 5'8", positive. Never dawned on me that he could possibly be a 6-footer. So now he really ain't got no excuse for being like he is.
I mean, if you want to name names, but then again, that could be a future guest who could break a commander
No,
story.
I'm not
so,
worried
you know.
about that part. I just don't want to seem passive aggressive, right? I had the
Yeah.
opportunity to tell him this to his face, and I did not. You
Oh,
know?
okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Bomani Jones with us here on Radio
Like, look at that
Row.
jacket. It might turn up in the shot. This
There
dude
you
gonna
go.
come past in his green jacket. You're gonna be like, "Hey, man, that's a fresh green jacket."
Yeah, we had. By the way, you talk about to bring this all together, dudes in green jackets and the size of a human being. Like, I could have told you that Aiden Hutchinson was probably a very large man.
Yes.
That dude walked by earlier. I could not believe how big that dude was.
So I have not seen him. It's funny because growing up, his dad is from the same area of Houston that I'm from. So I had a next door neighbor who. At least he said he was best friends with Aiden's dad, because at the time Aiden's dad was an All-American at Michigan. So of course the guy would say that he was like
Right.
his best friend or whatever. It would be
If
that
they had
sort
met
of thing.
once, they were best friends.
Yeah. That's all it takes is that. But no, all these dudes walk around, and even those of us who cover this, if you're not like locker room regular basis, you can forget just how big they are. And what has happened here in this particular one with this podcast surge, all these guys who don't really like dealing with media have now become media, and so now they have to come around. And I have seen multiple people give the same line. I saw Cam Newton, and I understand why he simply does not think that Brock Purdy is a game changer. I'm like, y'all didn't understand this from the beginning? Okay, cool. But people have been reminded. Some people are so big that they're bigger than the numbers say. They're
Right.
just really big.
Yes,
Cam
is one of
Newton's
those.
that guy.
So like I had a list going for a while. I mean, I haven't done this bit in a while, so I'm gonna see if I can recall it. But like the list was basically, it started with Cam and LeBron. that like you can't explain how big these people are, and especially if you're lucky enough to watch them either courtside in
Right.
LeBron's case or field side in Cam's case. Like if you watch Cam Newton, because here's the other thing too, and you know this from being around the NFL and doing. I know you weren't like a traditional sports reporter, but like you've seen NFL dudes up close in pads. If you're next to Trent Williams, you're like, that's a big dude. You're next to Trent Williams from in football pads, and you don't think he's from the same planet.
Correct.
So like Cam in football pads is ridiculous.
Yes.
And there's like Cam, LeBron, and a couple other dudes that you cannot begin to describe how not human they look, or like how they just can't possibly be the same species that we are.
And I think LeBron fits in an interesting category. Julius Peppers fits in this one too. At once, you can't believe how big they are, but also in some ways how thin they are. So, like, if you asked me to guess, I would not be surprised if you told me LeBron James has a 32, 33-inch waist. I once saw Julius Peppers in the mall, and I was like, dude, that dude's waist is like 33 inches. It's just everything else.
Yes.
It's just massive, giant. And he had the nerve. This is Julius Peppers in North Carolina, thought throwing a hood on would make us think that he was somebody else. In like 2004.
You're 6'7", bro. It
Dude,
ain't nowhere to hide.
But it's in North Carolina.
Right.
Like, come on, man. You are the local Jolly Green Giant, man. You ain't fooling us.
Yeah. No, and then those dudes start to run.
Yes.
And you're like, no, that can't possibly be correct. So yeah, it's wild. What's been the highlight for the week for you? Like, you're doing your pod out here? You're doing
Yeah, I've done the pod out here. I did the company I do my podcast for, Wave Sports and Entertainment. They also
big
do
year for them.
Yes, it is. They also do the Kelsey Brothers podcast.
Yes.
And so I was at that party last night.
How was that?
I mean, they set the whole spot up to look like the Kelsey Brothers house. By the way, I have to say, I learned very quickly who pays the bills at Wave Sports and Entertainment, or more accurately, who does not pay the bills at Wave Sports and Entertainment, and that would be your boy. Like, I had been in there, and we were in, like, this space, the place which is called The Space. Like, that's where we were recording pods out of. They had some studio space in the back. And somebody came and called me at some point and was like, yo, we got to show you something. And I looked on the wall, and they had all these pictures, like AI-generated pictures they had of the Kelsey brothers. They had one of me and Robert Griffin. Griffin also does his podcast for them. And me, like, in some, like, medieval type stuff or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. So we at the party, and I got a little VIP pass or whatever. And I had my friend with me. I'm like, yo, let me go show you the joint. And we walk around that corner, get to that wall. I wasn't on that wall. They say I'm back on there right now, but I wasn't on that wall for the Kelsey party. No, sirree, Bob.
No.
It's a Humbler, Jack. It's a Humbler.
I actually was thinking about this earlier because there was one of the 7 brands that Travis works with, as maybe it's more than that, but like I think it's Experian, the debit card or whatever. You probably have to do ads for them or something.
Dude, that's the thing. They buy up all those types of spots.
But like someone else was walking around with an Experian shirt, and I'm like, could you imagine if like Travis was walking around Radio Row this week with what's going on? But luckily for him, he made the game.
Yes. If he was walking around, it wouldn't be us, like the us who do this all the time. It would be the interlopers, right? Like the people who don't really do this, that, the general audience. That's a lot of this for the Super Bowl is general audience. And he's their guy right now. He is, and he's handling it very well.
I agree with that.
I have to say that he seems to. I can't think of anybody who's been thrust into this, because I think he's like these guys who have dated Kardashians. They thought they wanted this. They thought they knew what the attention crush was. Nah, player. It's more than you ever imagined.
I was talking about this actually with my wife last night. We were talking about their show and kind of the way that their brand has blown up, and obviously it's it was skyrocketing, and then he started dating Taylor, and then it added rocket fuel to the rocket ship, and off it went.
It is very interesting to me what Jason added to it, right?
Yeah.
Because to a degree, you can make the argument that Jason Kelsey is in a way the Eli Manning, which is to say there is a national fame that Eli Manning has because Peyton Manning is his brother, right?
Right.
Like that's where he gets that from. But Eli Manning standing on his own, it ain't gonna be there. But they have such an opposites thing going, and Jason, I met him last night for the first time. He's a really interesting, and warm kind of dude to talk to. They set each other off just 100% perfectly.
Yeah, it's a great pairing. But I think the thing that, and I'm gonna give a compliment to your company here, this is what I was telling my wife last night, is they're so well produced, and not in it's fake, but they have hit the let's talk about Taylor and the Swifties, but also be very, very high level football, but also explain football to people that have never met football. The balance that they've achieved, which seems like some kind of circus act with a bunch of spinning plates, 3 or 4 of which are on fire, and their ability to not drop one of them.
Yes.
Like, that is first and foremost a credit to them, but then, like, very clearly as someone in the business, like, I can see where some of the levers are perhaps being pulled, where I think they have done that exactly right.
And also, do you have a brother?
I do not. I have a sister.
So I have a brother. My brother's 13 years older than me, so we don't have the typical standard brother relationship thing, but I still have a brother. I know how this works. They had an episode where I forget what Travis said to Jason, but it was that made Jason so bad that they had to shut down
remember
they had to shut down the recording. But then when they came back, they was wearing different clothes, and I was like, oh, damn, he had to come back the next day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they are keeping it extra real on this show.
And then the finished product is polished and good and worth listening.
Yes.
If you had, I don't know how many interviews you've done this week, probably a million, but like, what's been your favorite guest, favorite thing you've done this week?
You know, I did one, and I forget the name of the organization. I want to get it right, but I think it's Vets for Vote or something like that.
Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah, and it's an organization that is taking veterans and trying to get them to be poll workers, and kind of basically explain the commonality and the idea that, okay, if you went to fight for America's way of life or for freedom or whatever it is, the embodiment of that way of life is the franchise. And so to be involved in the political process is a continuation of whatever your mission was before. It may not be as rock'em sock'em robots exciting necessarily, but that was a good one I did. I did one with my man Tom Tolbert. Like, I'm seeing all these people who, you know, I call them the How'd You Get My Number crew, right? Like, all these people that call me, and I do these hits across the country over really now 2 decades.
Yeah.
And now I actually get to see them and sit in the same space with them. Like, that's for somebody in my line of work, that's part of the fun.
No, it's a huge thing this week. You gave me your number, by the way.
Yes, I knew that. Yeah, you were not a stranger.
Yeah,
I knew this.
That was a Twitter DM, and my name was attached to it.
Yes.
So that was nice. I do want to talk substantively about the Leonsis thing in a second. Actually, let's do that now, because I forgot the other thing that I was going to say, which is what happens by Friday on Radio Row. Bomani Jones with us here on the Hoffman Show. But, I remember what it was. You're talking about kind of that meeting in person. For all the times you've been on the show, yesterday in a commercial break was the first time we met in person.
Yes.
It was also the first time that my producer has had to bring us out in the nearly 2-year history of the show out of a segment, because we were talking, and I was like, I got to go. I come back, I put the headset on, and Anthony, who's sitting in our studio back in D.C., is going, it's the Hoffman Show. You're probably wondering why I am talking right now.
It's a rite of passage, man.
Yeah.
It's a rite of passage for the producer. It wasn't about you. It was about him. It was seeing if he could handle the moment.
You gave Anthony his moment.
There we go. That's what I do.
Yeah, Anthony, you're welcome from Bomani here. But
Thank you, sir.
It's because we were talking about Leonsis moving the Wizards, and there are a million angles to this story, from economics to class and race to all of these different things. And he gave this interview earlier in the week with our buddy Eric Flack at WUSA 9 and had the incredible self-awareness to say, I am surprised at the outrage that has happened. But you seem to sit, at least fundamentally, at the highest level where I am, where it's like, do whatever you want with the Caps, man.
Yeah.
Why are you bringing the Wizards out of D.C.? Where do you sit on this, and what angle of this is most interesting
All
to
right,
you?
so some of you know I grew up an Atlanta Braves fan, and I didn't grow up in Atlanta. I was born in Atlanta. My parents have lived there for a long time, but I have an attachment to Atlanta and an understanding of that place.
And considering we're relatively close in age, we also had the great fortune of TBS, which meant
correct.
Braves games were on everywhere.
That is correct. I have a long story about that, but yes, you're 100% correct. So when the Braves moved from Turner Field to whatever the bank is now, Truist, I guess, is the one that has the stadium now. They moved from the heart of the city, and to be honest, not the safest place to be in the world. Atlanta has segregation and white flight issues that anytime somebody Atlanta's not a good sports town, it's like, no, Atlanta's a segregated town with bad public transportation. Those people ain't going down there. I get it. I got it to a degree, though. But they were set up there, and then they ramrodded the stadium into Cobb County, moved it out, all of this stuff. It was ugly. I didn't like it. But I did at least understand the argument that the fan base that you're talking about would probably get there more easily, be more willing to go there. The Braves can't fight that. Like, I get all of that. Got you. So if you want to move the hockey team to Northern Virginia, if I had to guess, that's where the fans are. A great example of that is in Miami, where they moved the hockey team out of Dade County, which is very, very Espanol, right? And they moved it to Broward, which is very, very English-speaking, and it made more sense for the team to be out there. I get that with the hockey team. It don't make the same sense with the basketball team, because it's not, to me at least, is not just that we associate basketball with D.C. in the way, and we're talking about high school basketball, college basketball.
Right.
Even if you move this out to Maryland, right? So when they were in Landover, it made sense for them to be there. It would make sense to be in Silver Spring. It would make sense to be in Bethesda. It would make sense to be in any of those Maryland sorts of areas for a basketball team. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong here, but that ain't Northern Virginia by any standard that I've had. I've never thought of Northern Virginia being that way. So to leave out of an arena that you own in a part of town that you guys basically took on the impetus of rebuilding and building up around this basketball team and then moving out there, hey, man, you're not going to get no new fans there. It's, who knows? Maybe if you win 50 games for the first time in my life, I'm 43 years old, then, hey, maybe they'll show up. But anybody with a brain can understand you can't sell this, homie. This ain't it.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I think the other thing that just bothers me on such a fundamental level is they make such a baseline economic argument, which I don't even know if is true. They clearly have done the math in a way that says, oh, yeah, look at all this, everything. And part of that argument is we're still going to sell out, or we're still going to have the same number, or we might even have more fans. But what they ignore is who the fans are.
Yes.
And it's like you've had a core group of people who have held your sorry franchise up that has not won 50 games since 1979, has not made the conference finals since basically as long.
Yes.
And now you're just going to abandon them so that someone else can go to the games? Like that's and you're surprised that people are mad about that?
Once upon a time, I was looking for work all over the place, and one of the places that I interviewed was I think it was then the Comcast DC station.
Yeah.
And something I'll always remember that they told me was you could see in the ratings for the Wizards whenever somebody got a whiff that they might be getting good, you'd see the numbers creep up. Like people have been waiting. They rightly are asking, just be good. Just give us something to do, and they'd go there. Hell, I did Gilbert's pod not too long ago. When Gilbert was there and it was fun, people were interested. If you just give them something, they'll do it. And so it will be absolutely terrible if they finally get there and you moved out here for these people. And I think for people, I guess I'm doing local radio, so I don't need to explain this, but for people who are not from that area, I don't think they understand the clear delineation between Northern Virginia, the district, and then when you get to PG and Montgomery County. But even to me, or maybe it's just the way my brain works, I think of the district and those two counties in Maryland as being much more together and similar than I think of Northern Virginia.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think the Montgomery County shifted a bit. I mean, there's still a lot of money in PG County, but like the lines I would say are much less blurry, and they're much more clear on the Virginians. I say that as someone who lived in suburban Northern Virginia for a while and quite enjoyed it. And if I had to pick somewhere to live that wasn't in the district where I live right now, I'd move back out there.
Yes.
I like the space as opposed to if I'm going to live in the city, I'm going to live in the city. If I want the suburban space, I'm going to live the place where there's suburban space. But I also realize that like the reason the suburbs exist is because they are ancillary parts or auxiliary parts, I should say, of the city, and the city's the thing at the center. Bomani Jones, The Right Time podcast, available wherever you get your pods. Appreciate your time, man. Great to finally yap in person.
Likewise. And by the way, the best part of this, you guys can't tell this, Kevin Harland is right over there.
Oh,
right?
He's coming next.
I got these headphones on. I can still hear Kevin Harland. like you're going to get the Kevin Harland experience because I'm getting it right now.
Yeah, we're gonna toss to a commercial break, and we're gonna listen to Kevin Harland, and then Kevin's gonna come over here for a quick visit with us next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where our big game coverage is presented by Solo Stove. Feel the heat of the world's most popular smokeless fire pit, solostove.com. We are moments away from Kevin Harland jumping over. He was just on with Grant and Danny, but he is saying goodbye to Danny on a Zoom right now because Grant is out here in Vegas with us. And then we are going to inform Kevin Harland that he has inspired a very, very important part of our show, something we do daily. Actually, it's not very important. It is just an actual thing on our show. So we're going to welcome in now one of the great voices in our business for just literally about 2-3 minutes here. It is Kevin Harland with us from Westwood One, CBS Sports. You know the voice, you know the face. Yeah, we are live on YouTube,
okay,
Kevin.
Good,
so we got TV, we got the radio, we got everything.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig Hoffman. We are the sister station of Grant and Danny and 106.7
really?
The Fan here in DC.
Yeah, I've been on with those guys a couple times over the years, and they're sure fun to be with.
They are great. They are great. We try to have fun on our show, and which is actually why we have you. So we have not set you up here, but we have a bit on our show that was inspired by you, and so we have we have circled this week as a goal to be able to meet with you and tell you about this because I want to ask you about.
Does this have with a former tight end with your team? Does this have? Okay.
No.
Okay.
This is so. What this is? The end of our show every day, we do a segment we call "Real Things Real People Said" into real microphones.
Yeah.
And the segment was founded when I was doing nights and weekends before I had this show, basically as an excuse to play your call of the drunk streakers that would take the field during Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
I am just curious because on television, when you're calling games for CBS, they have to cut away. You can't really talk about it. That is a part of the deal. So to me, it always felt like you were like, this is my chance when you did that on radio. When the person comes onto the field and you're like, this is happening, this is the delay in the game. What went through your mind when you thought, I'm just going to call this as if it's game action?
Well, they were ready for the snap, right? It was the Rams and the Niners, and they're ready for the snap, and the kid ran out of the stands and ran right through the slot receiver's position, literally seconds before the ball was going to be snapped in a shotgun. And he ran right through the defensive line and the linebackers of the Niners and through their secondary, and he ran with no one even blinking. Like they just looked at him. The players put their hands on their hips. He ran all the way to the one end. Then he came back the other, and there was no security. Like he just kept running. And then he kept doing things like taking off clothes and taking off his hat and waving his arms, and he had something written on his chest, and Kurt and I were kind of having fun with it. Now listen, when that bit was over and the game ended, I got to thinking about what I had done and thought, the NFL is going to hate this. I love my job, and I just screw myself here with this call. Luckily, the league was fine with it. It's not something that I would want to repeat.
Well, the thing is, though, like it happened again, and you kind of had this.
It did in the Super Bowl, but this guy came out like in a costume, and that was a little. And again, the game was bad, and the Chiefs are getting crushed by Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl in Tampa, ironically enough, and then the same thing kind of happened. But I swore to my wife as I got in bed that night, I will not do this again. No. I promise you, I will not do it again.
Well, that's a bummer for us.
I get in bed about 3 a.m. and because we were staying on the other side of Florida, so I literally after the game in Tampa drove to Fort Myers, up to north of Fort Myers. And I got in bed about 3 a.m. after the game had ended, and she said, "What did you do?" I said, "I know it, right? I'm like playing with fire. I got to stop. And so I've not done it since, and I doubt I will anymore.
That's okay. We also have used your very enthusiastic Burger King reads on TNT.
Oh, yeah,
There's been many. Yeah. Just now, somewhere in the back of your mind, you'll have a file when you do something that is funny, which you do because you all.
Well, there was one last night on my TNT broadcast.
Oh, was there?
Yeah,
Anthony,
yeah.
We have to get that ready for the end of the show. We must find this on Twitter. But now you know that those moments, on top of humoring your vast television audience, are being put to good use on a radio show in Washington, D.C.
Well, I can trust you to handle it with taste,
yes,
and decorum,
yes.
And I thank you for finding some humor in it. I hope my bosses feel the same way.
Well, with that, I do not want to upset your bosses. We are splitting our time with.
I don't know who this guy. He's been following me around all day long.
This guy, but we gotta.
He's muscle. All right, Andy. All right.
Andy's the muscle. He's also very responsible for any future interviews I may get, so I don't want to make him mad
either.
either.
You call me again sometime. We'll talk longer, okay?
Absolutely, we'll do it. And we will hear your coverage on Sunday. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Greg. Nice to be on with you.
Absolutely. I'll take that from you. Take the
that,
handshake.
that,
Take the handset. There we go. All right. That is Kevin Harland, everybody, who is going to be calling the Super Bowl this Sunday here on the Team 980 on Westwood One. That was, Anthony, quite frankly, everything I wanted it to be.
Nah, that was a dope, interview. Being able to just be graced with his presence, that's crazy, man. That is crazy.
And I love how he just, you couldn't see it. And unfortunately, because like the shotgun nature of that, I don't know that the video is the best video we've ever had. So recreating that, I might have to do a little creative editing. But you could see the wheels start to turn. And in a way, it felt like he was getting away with it all over again because, as he said, now that we know, we're never going to get that again because while we want it, I think what his wife thinks is far more important, at least to Kevin. And so we now know that he's just not going to do that again, but that was his chance, right? Like his reliving of that moment was his chance to be in that moment again for himself because clearly he finds it funny. This is a wacky bit that he enjoys doing. And seeing the magic, the light in his eyes, seeing him turn on, go into broadcaster Kevin Harland calling a game mode. What an experience, Anthony.
That's crazy, man. That is crazy. I'm jealous of you, Craig. I'm not going to lie.
We tried to tell you to come out here.
the amount of people you've come across, you've met, it's truly spectacular. I'm looking at the background right now, and it looks crazy for one.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. I know you've been kind of watching the stream online. Has there been anything that has happened behind us here that you've been like, oh my God, like any person you've seen, there's been no one making like funny faces behind us, I don't think.
Nah, I don't think so. Everybody's been, TV, I guess. What is that saying?
Appropriate?
Yeah, TV appropriate.
Yeah.
They act accordingly. They know what time it is.
Yeah.
Everybody's streaming there. Nobody got time for that, Craig.
Yeah. We went to this event last night, and it was like, filming in progress. If you don't want to be on camera, avoid this area. And I'm like, that is my entire existence this week. It's just cameras. I will say, I was talking about this with Clinton earlier. By the way, Clinton Yates joining the show. But when we were talking earlier in the day to set everything up, I was telling him, like, Radio Row is kind of TV Row now. Like, obviously, look, we're a part of it. We stream live on YouTube every single day, and we have, like, cameras and all that kind of stuff. It happens to be that just the way the technology went this week, I'm actually doing this off of my laptop camera. Thank you to Apple for making very high-quality cameras that I didn't have to do anything crazy with to get really high quality. But, the thing is, like, you look around and, there's lights and cameras and yeah, like some of it's for like Sports Illustrated Digital, I see, and there are like NFL this, or there are TV stations with sets, but like it really is still Radio Row, and it is radio stations from around the country. Just all of them are doing what we're doing, which is they have a digital video component, and it's pretty wild. On top of like the massive sets that like SiriusXM and others have, and then I think the other big change for the week is, like, some of the bigger sets, like ESPN used to always have their set on Radio Row. They don't. They have their set somewhere else this year. But who does have sets is DraftKings and FanDuel and these other digital-only outlets that have become some of the biggest players in our industry that are here on Radio Row doing their thing.
Yeah, man. I'm not going to lie. I feel as though, and even when I first came into radio, I thought, everything was just, for just audio purposes. But my old program director, CJ, he was very like involved in trying to get it digitalized and, just having a digital aspect to everything that we were doing. And now to see like everybody's on it is just,
it's crazy.
That's just the trend, I guess. Like that's where everybody's moving towards.
Yeah.
And you do a fantastic job with all of the stuff you do for the show, for 980. Is just
Well, thank you. I wasn't fishing for compliments, but
Oh, no.
looky what I caught.
Look, I'm just giving you. Your respect.
I appreciate the love. And by the way, if you want to check out, Anthony also does great work on our digital side. The podcast is what he puts together every single day. The full show, hour by hour, some of the biggest interviews. It's all broken down in the Hoffman Show podcast feed. Subscribe wherever you get your pods. And yes, we do have a video component to the show, live on YouTube at the Team 980, and then on demand as well. We are going to put up all the highlights of the week. Many of them are already up. There's just too much stuff to put up. So, like, some of the stuff is going to be put out this weekend, but at Craig Hoffman and at the Team 980 for all of the on-demand. Real quick, just a thought on, before we get to Yates coming up at 6 o'clock. But a thought on the NBA trade deadline yesterday. It was interesting looking at some of the Wizards' reaction and fans talking about the lack of moves yesterday. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I guess my big question, Ant, is kind of what's the rush? And looking around the league and some of the deals that got done and the teams I think that didn't make moves, I think is why I am okay with the Wizards mostly standing pat yesterday. You know, the Wizards ultimately, you know, a team like the Lakers, a team like the Warriors would have been good landing spots for a guy like Kyle Kuzma. I actually think, you know, either of those teams trading for Kuz, and it would have been ironic if Kuz had gone back to LA. Like, that would have been a phenomenal move that would have helped those teams a lot. And there could have been some bigger contracts that come back that the Wizards just take on. But it does seem like there's a lot of Wizards fans, and I think it's split there, because I also had a lot of people, as I was tweeting about this yesterday, be like, thank you, like, this is correct. So I don't want to make it seem like I have some minority opinion or it's like me against the world with this take, but like I feel like it's been so long, and the teams in this town, generally speaking, have been managed so poorly for so long, you know, and across multiple sports, that like people have forgotten how to play chess. Like, everyone's just interested in checkers and like, what is the next move? Well, this means this right now. And I just want to remind folks that, like, Winger and Dawkins are chess players. And they've played chess before. They played chess in Oklahoma City. They played chess in L.A. They are very, very good at understanding the value of their pieces. They are very good at understanding the value of other things and assets around the league. They have more information than we do, which is not to say that we can't judge what they do within our own knowledge scopes, but to not be able to draw lines, and I saw some very smart people doing this yesterday of, you know, they make the trade for Gafford, right, and they get a first-round pick back, and that first, it's like, oh, well, that's a late first, some great good that does it. Well, if you take some of the treasure trove of second-round picks that the Wizards have acquired in some deals, even since they took over some of those that came over with Jordan Poole or wherever else, and you package those with that 26th pick, could you get up to 15 and take a really good player at 15? Like, that's the kind of thing that you hopefully are going to be able to do over the next couple of years, and the packaging and the moving and being multiple moves ahead. And so I get the frustration because it doesn't feel like it's moving forward, but these steps are going to be incremental until there is the big one. Everything is just leading up to the big one, and we have not yet gotten close to the treasure trove of assets that are needed for the big one. The other thing that I would also say is Wizards fans are going to have to just live with Jordan Poole for right now. And I realize that sucks. He's been, like, I was someone who was very high on that deal. He's been mind-blowingly ineffective. That's literally the nicest way I can say it. It is unbelievable how poor Jordan Poole's performance has been this year. And I surely hope that they consider changing his role or benching him, or him getting a phantom hamstring injury that just allows him to get away, and let's try again next year, perhaps even. If there's a way you can get off that contract, it could be worth it. But then again, because you're not really concerned with your win-loss total in the next couple of years, like, there's just an element of living with it and hoping that it rebounds enough to send off to somewhere else that fans are going to have to live with. And I would say the last part of that is, let's not forget that the year is 2024 and that a $30 million contract is enough not to be the 5th best player in the league, but in 2024, Jordan Poole is the 50th highest paid player in the league, and that is likely only going to go down as more guys sign extensions ahead of him over the next couple of years. We'll get to more NBA stuff next week for sure. We'll get some thoughts on the Super Bowl game itself coming up over the final hour as well. But next, Clinton Yates with his thoughts on the game and the halftime show. Mike Golic Jr. in the final hour as well. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And joining us, from his home in Los Angeles, is Clinton Yates. And Clinton, I thought I was going to see you this week, buddy. Why are you not? Do this to me.
I have a lot going on in the next couple weeks, and I figured that a 2 to 3 day bender in Vegas, even if football related, probably wasn't good for business. And by business, I mean my body. How are you, though, sir?
I'm good. I am good, despite the fact that I do not get to see you. I flew so many percent of the way. That's okay. I will see you at some point soon, and
Yes.
we're still friends. So we have much to talk about. There's a Super Bowl 58 game on Sunday. And as has been immortalized in Hoffman Show Hour Opener fame, halftime is always a topic. We will get to that. As Usher, by the way, drops a new album this morning. Good business decision there.
I totally agree. I think that it's an interesting discussion about Usher because a lot of people, like, for whatever reason, like, well, Usher's not hot right now. Usher's not even the it guy. Like, for a long
Usher's
time.
Usher.
Right, exactly. A long time, Super Bowl acts were just popular people, whether they were legacy acts, which Usher is at this point, new album aside. He's done right there in the city you're in right now, a residency for some time. Usher, to a lot of folks who don't understand this, is timeless music. That's the whole reason why he's so dope. The whole reason why you hear him at every wedding you go to. Usher is the truth. So I love this choice. I saw a rumor today that Justin Bieber might be joining him. I don't need that personally, but I like the idea of Usher being there, especially when it's in Vegas where he has made a second home in the last couple of years.
No, he's a great choice because of the residency. Like, there's obviously a couple of artists that have done so tremendously well that you could have chosen from, but he is distinctly on that list. That was one of the things I was going to ask you, is the guest appearance, because he does, like, Rihanna, no guest appearance. Fine, got that. Beyonce, fine. Like, in a different way, like Bruce Springsteen, legend. Like, I feel like Usher is like one micro step below that, where, like, if you get the Super Bowl act, you're clearly huge. But there's Super Bowl acts that are probably going to have that guest, even like Coldplay, one of the biggest bands in the world. Like, they had multiple guests. So who to you would be like the Clinton Yates wish list on guests? I think Bieber would be pretty fantastic. Obviously, a global pop star. Ludacris feels like an option for
Sure.
Like, there's so many different great. Alicia Keys for My Boo. Like, there's so many different potential options.
Well, if he's going to do his actual duets in other songs with most people, which are, in fact, his most popular songs, well, then all of those are on the table. I think that's a question from a playlist standpoint. Like, what's he going to do? Is he going to go back to, old school stuff, or is he going to play the hits, so to speak? If he plays the hits, I think the most likely person you see come out would probably be Ludacris, because that's also, I saw a theme the other day where a guy wrote, he said, "Oh, Usher's playing the Super Bowl." Yes. You know my favorite song, "I'm a White Person." And, like, everybody knows which track that is without having to even say it. So Luda is the most likely person, I think, to come out. But it is interesting. It also speaks to Usher's skills as an artist. His solo repertoire is solid enough to stand on its own, and he works well enough with other people to have mega hits with other mega stars that don't delete from who he is.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's awesome, or would be interesting. Also, then they would immediately toss to the Ludacris State Farm commercial, because that's how marketing works. So, any particular predictions on set list, opener, closer, must have, banger, etc.?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the truth is, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, like, the thing is that at this point for me, Usher, just seeing Usher, it's not really about the playlist to me. I just feel that he's one of those guys in the music industry that when we look back in 50 years, we're going to say, wow, he gave us a lifetime. He gave us an entire body of work that literally has been since he was 14 years old. So I don't necessarily know that I have a favorite Usher song. I kind of want the auntie family reunion moment where everybody says, "Look at Usher, baby. He came out there, This young man did it, and he can have his flowers while he's still not only with us, but able to move around and rock that stage too." That's more important to me than any particular song he plays.
And make some money off him, because he just dropped a new album. So,
correct.
That's the right way to go about it. All right, Clinton Yates, of course, ESPN. with us. You can catch him on ESPN Daily, the podcast. You can catch him on ESPN frequently. That was a play on words on Around the Horn. All right, now time to go into the sporting event itself, the reason that allegedly we are all here. I don't know. It's been a weird week out here to kind of get the vibe check of the week, right? I feel like a lot of people have been shifting towards Kansas City because of Mahomes. And then all of a sudden there's a little bit of a late week pushback towards San Francisco where folks are like, I don't know. They're really good, which, they're in the Super Bowl. Where are you at on the game?
I am in the camp of, and I said this on television yesterday, until proven otherwise, there's no sensible football reason to bet against Pat Mahomes. Now, there's a lot of people who don't necessarily care for the Chiefs. There's a lot of people who don't seem to think that what they do is sexy enough from an offense standpoint, particularly coming up against the 49ers, who have so many weapons, who do so many different things. You think to yourself, well, if I don't otherwise have a rooting interest, I'd probably like to see the football the 49ers play more than I would like to see whatever the Chiefs are doing, dinking and dunking, and there's Kelsey again and open in the end zone. It has kind of a repetitive element to it that, in fact, reminds me a lot of the way that the Patriots used to play. A quarterback who knows the system can freestyle very well within that. A bunch of no-name guys at your wideout positions. You plug in a back or two here and there, and the best tight end in the league. And guess what? Here's another Super Bowl. It is a little boring. I get that. But ultimately, if I were a gambling man, which I'm not, that's a play on words for Vegas for you, Craig, I would be betting on the Chiefs. Until this changes, until that consistency ends, I don't see much reason to believe that it's going to be any different this week than it was any other week that had been in the Super Bowl or really in the playoffs since Pat Mahomes has been in the league.
Right. And the thing about the wide receivers for the Chiefs that I think is interesting is it's not like Belichick just didn't care. He's just like, we'll figure it out. I don't know, be careful because Julian Edelman was walking around earlier, but they figured it out with Julian Edelman. They figured it out with Danny Amendola. They figured it out with all these different guys that are completely unheralded. They were good at scouting specific skill sets for what Brady wanted, that underneath quickness, and then the big tight end, obviously, with Gronk. But, the Chiefs in back-to-back years took receivers in the second round. Sky Moore hasn't worked out, but, he was a second-round pick. Rashee Rice has really come on. He's a second-round pick. They have invested there in an attempt to replace Tyreek Hill, which they made the correct business decision, as great as Tyreek has been. You're not supposed to be able to lose the MVP or one of potential MVPs of the league and be this good, but, Mahomes is. And, Reed, I think the other thing that's important, and it is actually a good parallel to New England, too, is for as great as the quarterback is, the coach is not afraid to run it sometimes. And that's always in their back pocket. And, we saw it in New England in certain games where they would just run the mess out of it. And in this playoffs, Isaiah Pacheco has been one of the most important guys.
I think one of the big parts about this, too, is that people fool themselves into thinking that sexy is better. And what we found a lot in football, at least in the last 10 years, is that, some of these boring teams are really good, and that's just kind of how it goes. You talk about that dink and duck offense. You talk about what they do with guys like MVS. Yeah, they're not going to blow you away. They're not playing Madden football. You know what I mean? But again, Patrick Mahomes as a leader is the kind of person that I just don't think it makes sense to bet against because A, he's been there. B, he's won it. C, he's the better quarterback. This doesn't need to have all of these mysterious X factors when it comes down to a lot of things. The give it to the good dudes offense often works best, and the Chiefs do that about as well as anyone.
With that said, outside of the quarterback, the Niners have better dudes. Because sure. I think I heard a stat that they're 20-3 in their last 23 games when McCaffrey and Debo actually play. Maybe it's McCaffrey, Debo, and Kittle. But, them dudes are healthy. And I do look at the lull that the Niners had this year, which is pretty much the only time that they haven't looked like the best team in the league. Obviously, Baltimore had something to say about that, but they're gone. And that is when Debo was out. And that's the thing that I kind of can't get over is, offensively – well, yes, the Chiefs' defense has been fantastic. The Niners' offense, when they have all their dudes, hasn't really been stopped this year, hasn't really been slowed down this year, maybe a half at a time like Detroit did. But it just shows you, Kyle figured it out. And to me, Kyle and kind of where we see him by Sunday night is one of the fascinating elements of this game because I feel like it could go anyway. If they have a big, high-profile coaching mistake, that's a big thing on his resume all of a sudden of 28-3 and this and, a couple of things that happened in that first Super Bowl that they played. And then if it's just Mahomes beats them, it's he becomes Patrick Ewing to Michael Jordan in the 90s. And if he wins, it's wow, he is the best coach in the league. He freaking beat Mahomes.
Perhaps, but I do think that he, as far as all of the people involved in this game, has the most to lose and gain from so-called legacy Twitter. You look at some of those guys that play on that San Francisco team, and they've already got, I think of George Kittle, I think of CMC, I think of even to some degree Bosa. They've already gotten, he's on the defensive side obviously, but they've already got their personal legacies cemented. Nobody's going to look at them and say, oh, they didn't win a ring, they were bums, or they don't deserve to be in whatever.
Those are Hall
of
Fame guys.
Yes, those are Hall of Fame guys. Kyle Shanahan is not there yet. He's, I would argue, is to say not even particularly close yet, because not just the fact that they've run into the Mahomes machine or Andy Reid, but because these have been at the hands of him that he has not been able to succeed. The 28-3 thing ain't no all of a sudden, Gregory. That is a monster monkey on his back, as far as I'm concerned. And in general, he's the kind of guy, too, that with all of those weapons that we just referred to on offense, he gets a little cute sometimes. I don't necessarily love the fact that he feels the need to show off his big, powerful play-calling brain when oftentimes that isn't necessarily required to get what you want. Now, with Brock Purdy, it's a little bit of a different story. He doesn't have those options in the same way. And he has admittedly said he doesn't trust him in the same manner, even though he trusts him as much with what he does. Sticking to the game plan, even if they get outside of it or down for a couple series here or there, is vital to how the Niners win this. Yes, they've got better dudes, but can they figure out a way to put those pieces together to actually win a football game? That is always the hard part, and that's where Andy Reid strives, and people like Kyle Shanahan, who, by the way, is in a similar position to what Andy Reid was, let's just say 4, 5, 6 seasons ago.
Bingo.
And that's why it's so similar.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fascinating. I do think Kyle has definitely, like, we've seen glimpses of it. He's got to prove it on this stage, which you haven't had a chance to since, these two teams faced off 4 years ago. But it does feel like Kyle in big games has learned, but all it takes is one more to unlearn it and to go, hey, man, is this the amount of pressure that's too much? Going to be pretty fascinating to watch on Sunday, or perhaps listen to again. Super Bowl 58 is right here on the Team 980. That is Clinton Yates. We'll be talking about it. Do you know what you're doing for ESPN Daily Monday morning after the game?
We're doing a Super Bowl recap. My homeboy Jason Reed, I believe, is joining us for today's episode. For those of you who care about this storyline, we sat down and talked about Taylor Swift. Now, look, some of you have a problem with this story. Some of you don't think that it's worth discussing on any level. I'm not one of those people. I want to thank Louisa Thomas, by the way, whose husband used to play for the Ravens. She joined us. She writes for The New Yorker. She wrote a story about this, and we just sort of looked at it from the standpoint of there's a sociological element here that is very real. And for all of the, for lack of a better term, pardon my French here, loser incels who have an issue with smart, attractive, rich, powerful, talented women being a part of what they enjoy, there's a real needle being pushed here in terms of what the NFL is really trying to be. Do you say we're going all in on this new generation of fans and, in fact, cater to that? Or do you say, no, here's how we do it. You better get your butt in some face paint and jump through a table or else you're not a real NFL fan. I do think whether or not Travis and Taylor work out, there are some new eyeballs on this that have forced the NFL to look at itself differently and say, what kind of league do we want to actually be? If Taylor Swift stands up and says, hey, guess what? I got a real problem with guys who are, I don't know, or anything of that sort being in this league, and says something open about it, you've got to take that seriously. And nothing like that has happened, never mind what all the kookster conspiracy theorists have said about how this could affect presidential elections, which is insane. But I do think there is something to be said for what is now the social responsibility of having a much bigger spotlight than just that of the sports world on you. And frankly, Gregory, I think that's good for the league and good for fans.
No, I don't disagree with anything you just said. I can't wait to listen to that. That's going to go to the top of my queue for the plane ride back to D.C. tomorrow. And I will also, since we're now on the Taylor train, we had a great conversation at 5 o'clock yesterday with Nora Princiati, who has covered the NFL and covered Taylor Swift simultaneously for the last 4 years about fandom and kind of some of those same intersections. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely check out ESPN Daily and then check out our interview with Nora in the Hoffman Show podcast feed. That's Clinton Yates, everybody. Hopefully I'll see you soon, my friend.
In the words of the great Wesley Snipes in Passenger 57, always bet on black. See you later, Gregory. What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.
Is finally here.
the Hoffman Show. We're on the team. It's the Hoffman Show, final 40, not even 45, final 40 minutes on Radio Row here in Las Vegas. In the final 30, Mike Golic Jr. will join us. Be great to have Gojo on the show. We have tons of mutual friends, but never actually had him on the show, so hopefully this will be the first of what will eventually be many visits. Right now, though, as we finally, there's enough people that have cleared out here at Radio Row that for the first time all week, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Anthony because the Wi-Fi, it's a little, it's that pearly white smile, we still see it's there, but I will say it's a little grainy on our end of the video feed. But that's nothing you can do. It's the internet here in Vegas. The good internet is being plugged into the radio device, and we're just living on the Wi-Fi. But it is kind of weird how this place is cleared out, because unlike the previous couple days where it's cleared out, like when it's cleared out now, people are taking their equipment, and that'll be us in 30 whatever minutes, is like packing stuff up, and we're outie 3,000. But I definitely feel the air behind me cooling, Anthony, is we're on kind of the edge here, and all the radio stations are going home, or at the very least packing up their stuff with Radio Row Week behind them.
I'm so sorry. I'm over here having my own technological problems. the internet back here is a little slow. I was trying to get the prop that's pulled up on both these computers are not working, so I'm using my phone right now. So I missed majority of everything you just said.
I pull you up on video to talk to you I talked to you for like the fourth time all week. We had so many guests sit in this empty chair next to me, and I pushed it away, and I'm like, we're gonna pull Ann up on the video and everything, and that's how I was repaid.
But for the segment's purpose,
yes.
I do have our prop bets.
All right, let's do a couple of prop bets. We'll pick the game and give some keys coming up. We've kind of been doing it all week, but give me a couple over-unders, Ann, and let's take some shots at them.
All right, so the first over-under got to be Christian McCaffrey's rushing yards. 89.5 right now.
Oh, man, that's such a good number.
It is.
It's almost like we're sitting in a giant air-conditioned building in the middle of the desert because they're good at this. I'm going to say, this is to me a game where stars come out and perform. Now, the Chiefs' defense has been really good, and that gives me the gigantic pause. But if McCaffrey can get one big one, can he get into the 90s? Yeah. Oh, man. I actually think under's the right play, though. This Chiefs defense is nasty, man.
I think I would have to lean over. I think Debo and Christian McCaffrey, they're the catalyst for this offense. I'm expecting those guys. You got to lean on them. I'm expecting McCaffrey to get at least 20 carries, at least.
Yeah. No, I definitely do think that is a big-time factor here. Are they going to feed the beast? But I also feel like he could be a big part in the passing game because just running against this Chiefs defense has been miserable. So how do you, if you're Kyle, you got to create some matchups and try to get him out on a linebacker in space kind of thing?
Yeah. The next prop I have, actually, it's two of these guys. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, two of the best tight ends, that have been in the league the last couple of years. At George Kittle, he's at 49.5, and then Travis Kelce is at 70.5. And George Kittle, I'm expecting to have a big outing. Last time he said they had lost in the Super Bowl, he said, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to make these guys feel it. So I'm expecting him to have a big
I would say over on both. I mean, Kelce, unless the number was 115, 120, I would be taking over. Because he's the guy they're going to feed. And I know this Niners defense is good, and I know Fred Warner's amazing, but they're going to find ways. Travis Kelce's going to have 13 targets in the game. That is just how this is going to go. All right, let's hit one more before we get Mike Golic Jr.
on. The next one is actually a funny one. Field goal attempts for Butker. He's at 1.5. You think this is going to be
I feel better about that one than I do all the other ones.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I think the Chiefs will be able to move it a little bit, but I'll tell you the one that I really want. If I were to walk down we're in Mandalay Bay right now, so if I was to walk over to Mandalay Bay Sportsbook and put down something, it'd be the over on Mahomes rushing yards, always.
And that was
in the playoffs.
26.5.
Yeah,
26.5.
Yeah, he's going to have 50 rushing yards because that's how Patrick Mahomes does in playoff games.
And look, Fred Warner, Drake Greenlaw, I don't think they having that, Craig. I'm going with the under, baby.
You got to pick your poison.
I need to document these.
All right, well, while you do that, I'm going to go walk over to the DraftKings set and pull Mike Golic Jr. over here and be like, hello, sir, can you join the radio show in 3 minutes? And then Anthony and I will pick the game. That is as we wrap it up here from Radio Row on the Friday edition of the Hoffman Show. Anthony, why didn't you save it for the last segment?
I couldn't bring Mike Golic onto the show with Rebecca.
Mike Golic Jr.? Yes, you absolutely could.
Oh.
Look, I know what I'm doing bringing Gojo on for a sec. Like, we're going to talk some fun, like, serious, or not serious, but, like, we're going to talk some football for sure. Yeah. He'll make a pick with us. But, like, Mike is basically a friend of the show, even though I've never talked to him before a couple hours ago, because we have so many mutual friends. It's ridiculous.
I'm not going to lie. I was really sitting here contemplating, like,
why did you ask me? That would have been a great bit.
Yeah.
Grant, Anthony just ruined a bit. What a shame. Although I've been trying to be sparse with my bits, but like there's some bits that are just a part of our show. By the way, if you missed it earlier in the show, speaking of, and Gojo, well, I see him walking this way now. I think we're gonna do 3:45 with him, but he might be walking over here now. Anyway, the point is, earlier Kevin Harland was on, and we went into the origin story of Real Things, and it was phenomenal. So we will definitely be doing that. Or we'll definitely maybe run some of that back next week during Real Things, because that was great. It actually looks like Golic's going to come over now. So Anthony, I'm gonna slide and get the guest chair. You want to do it now? Yeah, let's just do it now, because your week is over, sir. So I'm gonna put that camera on there, and we'll do this, and we'll do the little moving around. You get headphones and the whole thing. I know we are. Just remember, unlike your very fancy set with all your stuff, we are regulated by the FCC. We are actual real radio, so there is that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, you've done a little bit of radio, like actual radio in your day. You know what you're doing.
Little bit.
Yeah.
A smidge. I used to get paychecks cut by the mouse, so
yeah.
I know to not cuss on air.
Yeah, no, the intern checks weren't very good, but I have also gotten that is like a cool thing when you work for Disney is like it really is like Mickey Mouse on your paycheck.
It is very much Mickey Mouse. So and Mickey Mouse in your wallet, usually in the Park Pass, which is a huge win.
Yeah, no, that's something my mom was always like, wait, no, you get Park Passes? And I was like, yeah,
big time.
So that career goals, I guess I should have oriented towards that. Instead, I'm here. Anyway, so it was telling Anthony, my producer, you feel like a friend of the show because we have so many mutual friends, guys like Clinton Yates, whatever. And but I'm excited to have you on for the first time, talk a little ball. As you guys have had all the different people, it's fun seeing all the different people coming up on your set right over our camera here all week. Like, what has been the sentiment to you about the actual game? Like, you do wind up talking about so much other stuff, but have you felt like the shift in the actual thoughts on the game change over the course of the week?
No, I think everyone's held pretty steady on what they thought the formula for both teams in this game was going to be, the themes about the running game, both rush defenses and some of the struggles that they've had there throughout most of the season. The funny part has been, when we ask the players who they think is going to win in this game, I appreciate that so many of them just go to the place of pettiness, where it's either they beat us or I'm sick of them being here or I got buddies on this team. It always becomes deeply personal, even if you get football analysis from them too. So I respect that.
Yeah, no. What's the pettiest someone was all week on your show?
Ooh. See, I don't know if we had anyone go too far down that road, because they also don't want to poke the bear. Because most of the petty is, well, we played in the conference in them, or we play in the division with them. In Mahomes and the Chiefs case, we did hear from some players like, hey, we want to see someone new. So it's not just fans who have that thought process. Players, obviously, they want their teams to be the one to win first and foremost, but there are guys that look and go, yeah, that team's doing all the winning right now. We need someone to knock them off.
Yeah, no, it is interesting how that narrative has turned, and it feels like sometimes you look back after a couple of years, like this happened with the Patriots, where they went from like this plucky underdog to all of a sudden it's like everybody hated them. But like Spygate was the reason that everybody changed. There was like a villain origin story. For the Chiefs, it just seems like everybody's sick of them. Like there's nothing that happened. They're doing the same exact things as we have when we've loved them. And now it does very much feel, unless you're part of the very small but very loud and annoying group of people that it's Taylor Swift influenced, that like that is the narrative is changing on them.
Yeah, I think a lot of their arc reminds me of the Golden State Warriors, like the 73-win Warriors, where there's no scandal tied to this. There's not something nefarious that's at the heart of it. A lot of it just is, hey, you're this much better than our team, and we don't like that. We're the
tired
thing
of
that
you
stops
kicking our
our head.
behind.
I mean,
Yeah.
think about for years, LeBron James in the Eastern Conference for a team like the Toronto Raptors, who are perennial 1 seeds, who couldn't get over that hump. Kansas City's become the stopper for a lot of teams, and they do enjoy it. Pat Mahomes is also a guy not afraid to hunt for calls, not afraid to complain when he feels like he's getting tagged up a little bit too much. And that's the kind of stuff that I think will grate on some people as they go along when their teams are the ones coming up short against them.
Golic Jr. with us. His show on the DraftKings Network. You can check that out. They had so many great interviews this week. I didn't hear a single one of them, but I could see who was going. That's the nature of our shows being on generally the same time.
I mean, that's kind of like most of sports media is us all getting watched in bars in silence. Like, no one actually knows our takes. No one actually cares what we're saying.
They have great guests. I have no idea what they say. But
Yeah,
I
they
see
look
them.
like they're having fun. That's why I go. I'm not Italian, but I major in hand motions on my father's son because you got to project that when you're usually on in silence in the back of an airport bar.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. It's the headline grabbers are Mahomes. The headline grabber is kind of Kyle's offense, if you will. I tend to think that the key to the game lies within the Chiefs' running game versus the Niners' ability to stop that. Is there a matchup that you're focused on, or whether it's that one or another one?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. That one's certainly at the heart of it. I mean, it's more how the Niners choose to address this. Do they believe, hey, like we heard Steve Wilkes complain about publicly, this was an effort thing where we felt like we had to coach that in a way that they shouldn't at this point in time. And they think, hey, we can still run these light box looks. They don't change up their fronts a lot. It's a lot of base 4-2 stuff. They lead, I think they're close to lead the NFL in light box looks. Can we get down like that, or are we going to have to account more resources on it? We're going to have to spin guys down into the box to try and make this receiving group beat you for Kansas City. So I certainly think that's the one that goes a long way, but I think it's really the same for the Chiefs on the other side. Like, that's a team that, especially on the perimeter of that rush defense, can be had. Kyle Shanahan's crews run outside zone as well as anybody in football. Christian McCaffrey's the best running back in the game. And so I think the Chiefs, a lot more moving parts, a defense that gets overall credit for being a lot better this season, but still has a deficiency in that same era that could be a problem if it's not handled right.
So I'm going to ask you a question about this game, and then I'm going to parlay it into the Commanders, and they've obviously just hired Cliff Kingsbury as the OC there, but you were an offensive lineman. And so when you are a part of a well-schemed run game,
Sure.
like Kyle, who is arguably the best at it, and like you have a really good angle versus like, oh God, this reach is going to blow. I do not want to have to deal with this. Let's see what happens. Like, how, as best as you can describe, how much easier is your job when it's well schemed versus when the defense got you on, whether it's a play or an entire game plan?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, when you're well schemed or when you've got a competent coordinator like Kyle, you're usually ahead of the chains, which helps. So you've got options on each down, and you get to dictate the terms. Being in obvious situations is really what you want to avoid, especially obvious passing downs as an offensive lineman, where these guys get to tee off and all these high-priced Ferrari pass rushers get to turn it loose. But I think the other side is formationally the way that Kyle and Andy in this game, the way they use tight ends, big personnel, a lot of that could shield you on the edge. Now you got a tight end attached, you got a fullback in the backfield. DNs have to be a little more accountable to that. It changes the way that they can align and the way that they can rush in certain situations and take some of the heat off that fastball as well there. And with Shanahan's system, they run so much of that outside zone, like you call it run and rip, where you're turning and burning. You're trying to get the defense to fast flow over the top. And it creates so many great opportunities when you're running play pass stuff, because now if the defense wants to run a blitz, they're running into a look that all of a sudden muddies the picture for them a little bit. It creates room for error in your blocking as an offensive lineman just by the structure of the play.
So boom, turn, local question. You look at like an air raid system like Cliff runs, right? And some of, like, one, they run, or at least in Arizona, ran a ton of 10 personnel. Like, they're in 4 wide. Good luck having a tight end, and nevertheless, like, what's a fullback? But also the being out of shotgun and some of the splits and all those kinds of things, they found ways to be, pretty good in some gap scheme stuff that they did. But, like, what are the challenges there when and also maybe some of the advantages of lighter personnel, so the kind of the pros and cons of that offense, the way you see it.
Yeah, so if you're running like what we think is the try, and I'll be curious to see if what Cliff can do as far as adjusting, or will he adjust to the personnel out there. This last year at USC, he obviously wasn't calling the plays, but within the body of that offense, it's a lot of the same stuff we've seen from those in the air raid tree over the years. I think it's a couple of things. if you're running out of a lot of like 10 personnel looks where you don't have an attached tight end in the mix there, you're going to get light box looks, which means it's a little bit easier. You've got so much natural space created in those spots that if you can get a seam, your running back's got a bunch of rooms to work with. It can make you look pretty good. Again, it creates a little bit of room for error. It also leaves you exposed. There's a lot of guys on blocks that are one-on-one on an island where if you get beat pretty badly, things can go bad in a hurry. And I think that's just it, is overall the exposure. And just in those systems, a lot of the short passes end up mimicking a more consistent run game. And so you end up dropping back and passing a lot. And I understand that the analytics don't reflect the idea that body blows matter over the course of a game when it comes to setting up play action, which is also very different in the shotgun, not as easy to run or execute there. I do think there is something mentally for an O-lineman up front where if you don't have plenty of those opportunities to go downhill, work in double teams, get an advantage against these D-linemen that are such great athletes, by the end of the game, that's where you start to see some of the cracks show up.
Yeah, no, I think there's also like a schematic element. I've talked about this with some analytics folks, and it's like you agree that you wouldn't pass the ball 100% of the time. That wouldn't be maximally effective, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, then there's somewhere there's a sweet spot. We haven't found the sweet spot yet. It's probably also a moving target. We could talk about that another time because we could probably spend hours on it. Mike Golic Jr. here with us for another minute or two as he's wrapped up his week on his show. You can check, I'm guessing, the YouTube page has all your interviews, all that kind of stuff.
Gojo and Golic, DraftKings YouTube channel, our podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Gojo and Golic is going to have all the interviews from Super Bowl week here.
What was your favorite one?
Man.
I know you guys had Olsen today, who's
I thought
so good.
Greg's awesome. I'm really homer pick for me. We had Sam Hartman, former Notre Dame quarterback, on. Guy just gets it. Like, again, he's very self-aware, understands, like, hey, I'm not going to be the first quarterback off the board in this draft. I know my limitations. I know what I have to work on there. But he's a guy that just has such a good head on his shoulders. He came in and embraced that play so quick. And I think no matter what, life's going to be very kind to him because he's a real good outlook and a really good sense of himself.
What was your favorite bit of the week? Whether one that you guys did or one that you saw, you're just like, what's happening there?
So my favorite bit that we did this week, we went to opening night, and since this game is a sequel, the game played 4 years ago, we asked all the players, or a lot of them that we could wrangle up, what their favorite sequel was. And I was amazed at the variety between both teams here. We had a couple of guys advocating for Joe Tooney from the Chiefs, their offensive guard, went the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's a big fan of Return of the King. Blake Bell, the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, went the Harry Potter series. Him and his wife had just watched the entire series of movies for the first time there. Kyle Juszczyk went Pitch Perfect 2, man after my own heart.
Okay.
So a lot of really good worldly choices from that group.
That's a good bit. That's quality.
I
I feel like a lot of the bits don't have, like, it's all sizzle, no substance. Just a little bit. That's the key to a good bit. Just a smidge. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for us. Anything, like, are you staying for the game? Or are you out? Like, what's the?
I am. I'm getting out of here. I've been here since Sunday. I love
Sunday?
We got here Sunday. We were out here all week. I love Super Bowl week. It's such a cool opportunity to catch up with so many friends I've been fortunate to make in this industry, old coworkers. Some of whom are still, at ESPN. Some of whom have shot off to other places now and are doing so well, to check in with them, to have a few laughs, to get to see people go to work and to get to visit like this. But I'm exhausted. I went out way too hard last night. You can hear it in my voice. I need to go home and get some sleep.
Yeah, no, I'm at the end of my brain cells. I did have one more thing that I thought of to ask you, and you're kind of talking about catching up with people. Do you have a moment this week where you're up on that big fancy stage with your dad and you just go, because, like, you guys work together at ESPN, which is a big deal. Like, ESPN's still ESPN, but, like, where you're like, holy crap, like, I am up here with my dad on this thing. This is our show. Like, just kind of a moment to take it all in. I know you guys have been doing it for yourselves for a little bit now, but, like, a scene like this seems like the time that might hit you.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be more so in the coming days here. We took a couple of moments. I think to more just appreciate the investment from DraftKings and our staff who works around us there. The folks from the Vegas Stats and Information Network that they work in concert with. So many people come together to make something like that possible, and everybody that was up on that stage, Michael Lombardi and Stormy Bonantoni and Ross Tucker and the LeBatard show over at Circa, and all these moving parts that take so many people to make it happen, and to see that, all right, like I said, as we're figuring out, for us, life beyond the four letters, but for an industry that's constantly changing and seeing new players emerge, to see in such a short time that DraftKings has been doing content, how seriously they've taken this, how much it matters, the kind of resources and support they've given us. There is a deep appreciation for that up there for a lot of this week and for the hardworking people that we've got working on our show every day, but working behind the scenes in that whole operation. It's a special group, and that's, from sports to being at ESPN to now, it's always about the locker room. It's about the people you get to go to work with every day. And, to have another special group that we found here of people that I'll hopefully get to know for a long time rocks.
That's awesome, man. That's Mike Golic Jr. Gojo and Golic is the show on the DraftKings Network. We get back, Anthony and I will pick the game, do real things, and then I'm going to be done talking because I am out of brain cells. All right, we are back for the final time. Anthony, I didn't do it all day. I didn't say we're back all day, and then I just did it. I am legitimately out of brain cells at the end of this week. Also, does this mic sound terrible again?
It's a little loud.
All right, hold on. Let me see. Oh, I think I grabbed the mic that I had given Golic. Let's grab. Is this the Hoffman volume mic? That sounds better.
Yep.
Yeah, just different people speak at different volumes. Like we had Kevin Harland on, and I had to adjust to a Harland volume. I had to go to a DA volume, Bomani Jones volume, Golic volume, are all different. But I'm running on E, bro. This is in the best way. What a week. I mean, in the last 3 days of radio, we have had David Chang, celebrity chef, Mike Loxley, the Maryland football coach, Bomani Jones, like national commentator, like the variety, and like we've had so many of those things. I mean, Yates is on with us all the time, thank the Lord, but like I don't take that for granted that we have someone of Clinton's stature that I'm lucky enough to be very good friends with, and that lets us get someone like Golic Jr., who was just on with us, and there's so many great people and so many interesting conversations. And we've just had so many great guests, and it's like just riding this emotional high of the week. And Anthony, you want to know the really, really super duper fun part about this?
What?
I'm going to do like a mini version in 3 weeks.
Oh, because you're going back to the NFL.
Because we're going to Indy. We're going to do the NFL draft version of this in 3 weeks because, like, even like today, I was texting with Trevor Sikkema from PFF, who's a good buddy, and is always takes some time each draft season to come on with us a few times. And now he's like their lead draft guy at PFF, and I saw him yesterday float through, and so I shot him a text. I was like, "Hey, what's your schedule like? Do you want to come on today?" And he's like, "Oh, I took a red eye back last night." I was like, "All right, cool. We'll get you an Indy." And so, like, that's the kind of just how this goes. Is there's all kinds of people around. Indy's definitely more concentrated. It is really truly more football, more draft as opposed to like all the varying different conversations. I hope that we talked about the game enough this week. I feel like we got it in a bunch of different ways. I will say that conversation we just had with Gojo was more football and like more serious than I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to do skits and bits, and he was just so good on the nuts and bolts football. I was like, well, let's keep doing this. So yeah, what a week it's been here in Radio Row. You miss any of it, check the Hoffman Show podcast feed. Incredible stuff. And the YouTube stuff will be up over the next couple of days as well. We'll see how much time I have to cut video tonight and get anything else up. But we had such great stuff, and we'll get it up over the next couple of days. So, as you're sitting around on Super Bowl Sunday, if there's an interview that you missed, it'll probably be up by then. All right, Anthony, it is time. I don't know that we're going to have time for real things. I don't know what our out time is, but we do have time to pick the game. So I need from you a key to the game, and then I need a pick.
You put me on the spot. But
we're only been building to this the entire week. What do you mean I put you on the spot?
I've been flip-flopping back and forth, but I
So
think
have
my
I.
final pick will be the Kansas City Chiefs. I can't bet against Mahomes. I think he's going to be able to carve up that San Fran defense. I mean, I think the San Fran's defense gets like more credit than like they deserve because of just like the names that they have, but I don't think they've been good to me all year long. So, and I think Mahomes, as poised as he'll be in the pocket, I think he'll be able to dissect them.
So I agree with you for a slightly different reason. I do think San Francisco's defense is a little overrated this season versus their reputation.
Yeah.
Their numbers aren't as good as their reputation this season. With that said, they're still very good. Offensively, they are terrifying because if Purdy is remotely on with the guys that they have, like they can put up high 20s, if not 30 points this weekend against a very, very good Kansas City team. But I do think, like, the Niners' defense is not as good as Baltimore's. And I don't know that they're as good as Buffalo's was playing either. Kansas City already beat them. So I think the key to the game, I've been kind of hinting at this all week, is Pacheco. Like, if Pacheco gets going and Kansas City can be balanced, I think Kansas City can win the game. I know I picked the Niners before the season, and I know this feels like a bit of a hedge because now I get to say that I'm right no matter what. But as the week has gone on, even when we were at our event with the Team 980 versus 106.7 The Fan Live last week, a week ago today, 78 years ago, a week ago today, I said the Niners. But as the week has gone on, I am with you. I just can't bring myself to pick against Mahomes again. I'm taking Kansas City 27-24. I think I'll be rooting for San Francisco because there's part of me that wants to be right on the season-long prediction more than this week's prediction, but also that I just really feel like Kyle's resume should have a Super Bowl victory on it, and I think he's the best coach in the league. I'm so torn, but when you're torn, go with Mahomes. I'm going with Mahomes. How much time do we have left in the show?
We're overtime, but I'm flexible and I can adjust.
Okay, well, that's our show from Radio Row. Thanks to Haney for keeping everything running back in D.C. Our guy Jacob running things out here in Vegas, just a tremendous job. My wife Rachel also producing the show this week out here with me in Vegas. Really, she actually was at times. This has been a phenomenal week. We'll see you back in the shop on Monday. Don't forget the Super Bowl is live on the Team 980 this Sunday. This is the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, and we are always live on the free Odyssey app.